Let's talk about 3 numbers that you need to know before you retire. And number 2 is going to be the most important. So hang on to the middle, because if you underestimate the second number we're going to talk about, it could absolutely derail and destroy your retirement. You ready to get into this? Let's go. All right, 3 numbers you want to know before you retire. Number 1. When are you going to claim Social Security benefits? So let's look at the strategy, and I want to go through why understanding when you are going to claim Social Security benefits could elongate your retirement income, not by months, not by 1 or 2 years, but by many, many years. And that's why it's so important to understand exactly when you are going to claim Social Security based on your individual situation. You ready? Let's get into this. All right. So I've got John and Ashley Homer, and we're going to look at Social Security, and we're going to look at their strategy when it comes to retirement on these 3 numbers. So the first area we're going to look at is Social Security benefits. Now, the reason we want to understand when we claim Social Security benefits is because you really only get one shot at claiming Social Security at the right time. Now, listen, there is a Social Security do-over if you claim Social Security, and within the 12 months of claiming Social Security, you go, oh my gosh, I made the wrong decision. You can pay back all of the Social Security benefits that you have received, and the clock will start ticking again on when you can claim Social Security benefits. But we don't want to do that. We don't want to pay back any benefits. We don't want to have to go through the hassle of filing the right forms. We want to claim Social Security at the right time. So for John and Ashley, let's look at this. So John at 67 would get $3,000 a month. That's a pretty good Social Security benefit. Ashley at 67 would get $2,400 a month. So let's look at this, because we want to understand the percentages they would receive at their specific ages. Now, if they claim at 62 years old, they would get 70% of their full retirement benefit. For John, that's going to be $2,100. For Ashley, that's $1,680. Remember, full retirement benefit for Ashley is $2,400. So 70% is $1,680. For John, it's $3,000 a month. $2,100 is his 70%. Now, if he claims at 63, 64, 65, or 66, you can see how his benefit will go up. There also will be COLA increases on his benefit as he waits as well. Now, we are not going to calculate in COLA until he claims Social Security. Then we're going to turn on COLA benefits. Now, the reason I don't calculate COLA right away is just because I'm conservative. I know that kind of irks some of you because I see it in the comment section, but that's just me and my planning. If we don't put COLA increases in before we claim, and COLA happens, right? We get the COLA increases and we claim Social Security at a higher value than what I'm projecting, that's a good thing. But if the COLA increases don't come and the Social Security projection comes at where we projected it at, then we've done some good planning. So I'm trying to not overshoot when it comes to claiming Social Security. It's just my way of being conservative. Now, at 67, there's our full retirement age, $3,000 for John. 68, 69, and 70, you're getting an increase in benefit. I call it, if you're an overachiever, a broccoli eater, maybe you claim after 67. Now, that doesn't mean you're better than someone who claims at 62. Maybe you continue to work 65, 66, 67, 68, and it doesn't make sense for you to claim Social Security benefits early, right? You don't want to go through the whole payback, taken away, and all that stuff. Now, most of my self-employed clients, they continue to run their business well into their mid-60s, late 60s, so they're not claiming Social Security benefits till later on because they don't want to deal with the $1 every $2 you make, the clawback and all that stuff. Okay. Now, once you're 67, though, you can claim Social Security and make as much money as you want. It's before 67 where we run into some issues on that. Okay, so let me show you why it's important to understand when to claim Social Security. So they're going to claim at 67 years old. Now they're 59, and we're going to claim, or we're going to retire at 61. So we're retiring in 2 years, and we're going to claim Social Security at 67. So we're going to skip a lot of these tabs because I just want to stick to what we're looking at on this video. So we go to pre-retirement. At 59, Their gross salaries, $15,416. There's their monthly contributions into their retirement plans. So at 60, they'll have $567,000 saved for retirement. So the question is, can I retire at 61 with $567,000? And for them, the answer, unfortunately, is no, you cannot. They're out of money at 72. Now, we're running the rate of return on their investments of 4%. We've got inflation of 3%, and we've got a COLA increase on Social Security of 2.56, which is the 109-year average. I'm sorry, not the 109-year average. That's inflation, 3.27. Social Security, it's 2.56 since the 1970s when they instituted the COLA increase for Social Security. Man, these numbers, listen, I'm from Kentucky. All the numbers get bubbled in my head, and it's almost baseball season as I'm recording this, so I'm thinking about averages and WARs and all kinds of other things when it comes to baseball. So I got numbers all over myself. All right, so let me show you why it's important. Hey, listen, what's your favorite baseball team? Leave in the comments section. We'd love to know. Let me show you why it's so important to understand when you're going to claim Social Security. So they're out of money at 72, right? Retiring at 61, out of money at 72, claiming Social Security at 67. Let's adjust when they take Social Security. And let me show you how this works within the software. So we can kind of go back and finagle it based on, spousal benefits and when they want to retire, and maybe one spouse wants to keep working, the other one doesn't. But let's assume they're both going to retire, and we're going to let the software just kind of optimize it, okay? So we go to this little tab, and we want to see, when does the software say that it's the most optimal time based on taxes, inflation, rates of return, Roth conversions, how your assets are allocated, how your investments are allocated based on different sectors and things like that. When does it make sense? And this is something that you need. You need to understand when is the most appropriate time to claim Social Security based on all these different factors. And if you'd like a financial EKG with us, all the information is in the description below. So let's look at this. Now, we were saying claim Social Security at 67, or that's what they wanted to do. The software says what? 62. Okay, now here's what I want you to do. I want you to pause the video, and I want you to put in the comment section how long you think their income will last when we claim at 62. So pause it. Okay, you ready to see the answer? All right, let's look at this. We were running out of money at 72. Now, adjusted, taking Social Security at 62, we run out of money at 81. So what is that? 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81. Now, I'm from Kentucky, and we count with our fingers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 9 years because we waited, or we claimed Social Security early instead of waiting until 67. Do you see why this is so important to understand? Do you see why you need to understand your Social Security claiming decision? All right, let's get to the number 2 number you need to know before you retire. All right, the second number that you need to understand before you retire, and this is the most important number that you need to know, you need to understand, you need to have nailed down before you put in your termination, before you say, hey, I'm going to Aruba, I am leaving, I'm moving to Portugal, I'm moving to Mexico, I'm moving to Florida, we're full. You need to understand this number. Healthcare. What's your healthcare going to cost in retirement? I'm not just talking about your health insurance premium. I'm talking about your Medicare premium. I'm talking about your out-of-pocket cost. I'm talking about long-term care, assisted living. How much is your healthcare going to cost? The average cost for healthcare for a couple pre-65 is about $16,000 a year just in premiums. That's just healthcare premiums. For a single, it's about half that, let's say $8,000. So we need to have a plan for our health insurance cost. We need to know what our health care is going to cost. Maybe you have a specific chronic condition, maybe diabetes or MS, or maybe you need to have some kind of surgery. Maybe you have to have a surgery that's not covered fully by your health insurance. I just had a client, they have jaw surgery. It's going to cost them $30,000. And so you need to understand, what are my health insurance costs? Let's look at it in the software. All right, so when we're looking at our healthcare costs, let me show you the 2 ways that we anticipate and project this out for clients. Okay, so we've got John and Ashley here, and there's 2 costs that we want to project out on their expenses. The first thing we want to project out, because they want to retire at 61, is their health insurance premium before age 65, okay? So we're going to assume $800 a month is going to be their health insurance premium. Now, remember, the average cost for health insurance premiums for a couple is $16,000. Now, that's without any subsidies calculating in. So that's about $1,300 a month. So we're going to look at about $533 behind that, because we're going to anticipate some subsidies for their health insurance. We've done the deep dive, and we're going to, based on their income and their withdrawals, we're going to assume we're going to get some healthcare subsidies. So we're going to assume an $800 a month premium. Now, Medicare costs, a lot of people think Medicare is free. No. Medicare's not free. First of all, you've got your Part B premium that'll come out of your Social Security check. So whatever your Social Security payment is, take off $170 for Medicare Part B premium. That goes up every year. And then you also have to think about, am I going to get a supplement, or am I going to get a Medicare Advantage plan? And there's two differences in how these are paid for. A Medicare supplement is like traditional insurance. You pay a monthly premium, and depending on the plan you pick, N and G are kind of the popular plans right now, you might have a copay at the doctor, you might have a deductible, or you might have nothing, but you pay a monthly premium. That's probably going to run somewhere between $400 and $800 for a single or married person. Now, a Medicare Advantage plan, it's normally like an HMO. You don't have a monthly premium to the plan, but you do have costs for copays, deductibles, your drugs, things like that. If you have a CAT scan, MRI, there's a copay for that. And so that's an Advantage plan. They have out-of-pocket maxes, could be $7,000, could be $10,000. So depending on the type of plan you're going to go with, right, you need to understand the cost. Maybe you're super healthy and you want to take the risk with a Medicare Advantage plan, or you just don't want to pay the monthly premium. You might do that. Maybe you have a chronic condition where you know you're going to need extensive care or continual care. You'll go with the supplement plan. You'll pay the out-of-pocket up front, knowing you're going to save money on the back end. We got to understand this. This is something that, as a financial advisor, as a certified retirement counselor, we're looking at. And if your advisor is not looking at your health care, are they doing you a disservice? Are they looking at everything? So we're looking at Medicare costs. That's $700 a month, because they want to go with a supplement. All right. Now, we also need to project out our long-term care costs. Now, I know that not everybody's going to need long-term care. Most of you are going to need home health care, meaning a nurse comes in, or what we call informal care. A spouse takes care of a spouse. A child takes care of a parent. Okay, that's called informal care. Now, what we can do in the software is we can see. So John and Ashley are in Kansas. Okay, we ain't in Kansas anymore. They're in Kansas, right? Where, what is that? Somewhere over the rainbow, right? Judy Garland. Can't think of her name right now off of the top of my head, in the movie The Wizard of Oz. What was the name? Leave it in the comments, because I'm blanking right now. So, home health care services, adult assisted living, and private room for nursing home. So let's assume that we're going to need in-home care. And let's say that's $46.71. That's today's cost in Kansas. So let's put that in, $46.71. Okay? We know that at 80, with inflation, the future monthly costs are going to be $9,123. So what we can do is we can go to the software. Here's all of our assumptions, right, built into the software. But now at 72, well, we're out of money at 72, so it doesn't really work in this case. Let's go back. Let's adjust their Social Security. And let me show you why we got to do this, because I got to show you the plan working better. So we'll adjust their Social Security. So now, boom, they're out of money at 81. But let's go to long-term care. So let's say at 80, we need some sort of assisted living. Well, at 80, we take that money out, we're out of money immediately, right? So John's done that. Ashley's now out of money. Now we have the house, which you could reverse mortgage, we could sell it, whatever. But we want to have an idea of what this is going to look like. Now, I hope and pray that you do not have to deal with this. I hope we all go to sleep and we wake up on golden streets. That's the goal, right? But that's not always the case. I've had personal family who had to deal with assisted living and home health care. And I've been in some of those facilities with family members who have, it's not necessarily the best place to be. So we want to have a plan for it so that we don't have to deal with some of the stuff that I've seen, right? And again, I'm not trying to scare you. Please don't put that in the comments. I'm just wanting a plan, right? We just want to have a plan for our care. So this is something you really got to understand. How do we plan for this? And that's something we got to build into the software, saying, hey, maybe we might have to work a little bit longer because we don't have the assets to cover long-term care. Or maybe we know, hey, the kids aren't going to get the house. We're going to do a reverse mortgage on it. We're going to sell it if we need independent care or assisted living or whatever. We just need to have a plan. All right, the third and final number that you need to know before you retire is, what is your retirement income need going to be, and how much retirement income do you want? Because need and want are two different things, right? How much do you need? How much do you need for taxes? How much do you need for groceries? How much do you need for gas? How much do you need for your health insurance? How much do you need, right? Like, how much do you need to survive? And then how much do you want? How much do you want for travel, spoiling the grandkids, renovating your house? How much do you need for miscellaneous expenses? Do you want a new car? You've got to understand, how much do I need versus how much do I want? And you need to understand the inflationary factors on both of those, right? Needs are going to have 3.27% inflation forever, right? In perpetuity, you're always going to be eating, right? Or putting on clothes and whatever. Once, like at 90, you might not be traveling to Europe. I hope you are, but you might not be. So there's two different ways to look at this. What, you ready? Let's just look at it in the software and go from there. All right, we're at the third and final number that you need to know before you retire, and that is your retirement income need versus want. You ready? All right, so here's our expenses for John and Ashley, and we need to understand, how much are you going to need? How much are you going to want? How long are these expenses going to last? What are the different inflation rates on these expenses? And I'll show you exactly why. So here's our mortgage. That's the first expense that we need, $1,100, right? We need our house. So they have a mortgage, and it's going to last until 2043. But here's what I want you to notice. What's not on the mortgage? Inflation, right? They don't have an ARM loan. They have a fixed loan. So their inflation is zero, meaning that payment is not going to change. Now, the principal and the interest inside of that payment will change based on the amortization schedule, but the actual payment, unless they put more on their mortgage, is not going to change. It's $1,100 every month. And what I like to do is to strip out taxes and insurance, because if we strip that out, then we get a better idea of the overall inflation rate for their total retirement income need and want. Now, their baseline expenses are $3,600. This is like food, gas, groceries, things that you need to survive, right? Survival stuff. We're going to put inflation of 3.27% on that. That's the 109-year average for inflation. Could be higher, could be lower when they retire. We're just using that as a baseline. Health insurance and Medicare. Remember, we've talked about that. That's a number you need to know. 3.27, 3.27. We're putting inflation on healthcare. Healthcare inflation is actually about 7%, but we're going to put 3.27% on it because we're just averaging it out with all of inflation. Now, travel, this is where the fun stuff comes in. Travel. They want about $500 a month for travel. They're not big travelers, so they want about $6,000 a year with inflation. Now, the question I always ask anytime somebody's with me, I say, okay, we want to travel. We want $6,000 a month or $6,000 a year. How long do you want to travel? You got to understand that. How long do you need this money? Because if we put a travel budget on there and we just say, well, we're going to spend that until perpetuity, are you really going to be traveling at 92, at 82, at 80? Are you really going to be traveling the same at 80 that you are at 61? I doubt it. Now, I hope so. Again, I hope and pray, but I doubt it. So we need to have that in the software. So for them, they're saying 10 years until 71. Now, another thing, let me get the bonus tip. Ding, 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 ding. Bonus tip you want to think about. Miscellaneous expenses. Water heater, washer dryer, car, maybe truck, whatever. Miscellaneous. New roof. I live in Florida. Hurricanes, things like that. What are your miscellaneous expenses? And you want to understand those and you want to calculate those in. Now, we're going to leave those out on here, but an easy way to do that is go back through a couple of years of your budget, your credit card, and just kind of get a good average of how much you spent miscellaneous. Or maybe you already know we're going to need new air conditioners, we're going to need a water softener, we're going to need, and we can calculate that into the software. So we really want to understand what our retirement income need versus want is and what the inflation rate are is on those expenses, because that's going to determine how long our money lasts. So let's look at this. So for them, let's add up their monthly expenses. So we have a mortgage of $1,100. We have baseline expenses of $3,600. So that's $4,700 a month. That's what we got up here. This is our current monthly expenses. Now, we also understand that we're going to have health insurance, Medicare, and travel. So health insurance is $800, Medicare is $700, and travel is $500. So that's $6,700 in retirement income. Okay, now we have different inflation rates. We have drop-off times for certain expenses. But what if we just went to our expenses and we just plugged in $6,700 and we just let it go? We just said, oh, let's just say $6,700, inflation, no big deal. What's that do? Look at that. 71 is when they're out of money. So they're projecting it 10 years less because we didn't do the appropriate calculation for inflation and drop-offs. That's why it's so important to look at this. So let's go back to expenses. Let's put in the advanced expense plan, and we can get super detailed on expenses. As you can see, we could break this down into every different category. I'm kind of simple guy, so I try to keep it all up here visually for clients so they can see it. But we can actually send this expense plan to a client. They can fill it out, and we can get, I'm talking down to the penny detailed on expenses with inflation and how much money is going to go in, go out, all that stuff. Now listen, again, if you want a financial EKG, go to the description below. Let's do this. Now, we need to understand as well, when it comes to our retirement income and our retirement income need, when some of these expenses are going to fall off and how that's going to affect our withdrawal orders as well. So let's go back to assets. So here's our basic assets. For John and Ashley, real simple. John's got a Fidelity 401k of $198,000. Ashley's got a 403b of $254,000, and they got $25,000 in the bank. So there's not a whole lot of withdrawal order changes on this, but we need to understand where we're going to start pulling our income from. How is that going to be taxed? Because when we look at these expenses, this is our projected monthly expenses after tax. So when we take out our retirement income, because they have a 401k and 403b, taxes are going to have to go above that. So remember that $6,700 number I just told you? That's an after-tax number. So we go to taxes. Let's look at their tax bracket. Their projected federal rate is 12.41, right? They're in the 22% bracket, but after deductions and all that, they're at 12.41. So if $6,700 is our net number, we got to gross 12.41% on top of that. Does that make sense? Let me say that one more time. We need $6,700 net for retirement income. We've got to take out about 12% more on top of that. So that means we're actually withdrawing more than we need because we got to pay Uncle Sam. Okay? Thank you. Okay, good. All right. So let's put all this together. So let's go to updates here. So we know we got John and Ashley. We know how much our expenses are going to be. We know when we're going to claim Social Security. That's going to be at 62. We know based on those current scenarios, we're out of 81. Does 81 seem a little early? To me, it does. I know some people think, oh, Drew, I'm going to die at 80. Well, if you've talked to Jesus and he's giving you a checkout day, great. But I haven't. He ain't told me. And here's the thing too. Let's be kind of real about this for a second. With healthcare, I've got a lot of clients who are older, and my clients 15, 16 years ago when I first got into this business, when they would get ill with something, it would kill them or they would die quicker. I've got clients today that are surviving things that clients died from 15 years ago. And so what if you live an extra 2, 3, 4, 5 years because of advancements in healthcare? Where's your retirement income going to come from? That's what we want to understand. Again, I'm not trying to make light of that. I'm trying to say is we really need to have a plan for, let's say, like 85, 90. I think that's a good place to shoot for. So 81's probably not a good place for us to run out of money. Even doing a reverse mortgage on our house, that's still probably not a good place to run out of money. So we're going to have to adjust some things. We either got to lower our expenses, which they don't want to do, or we got to work longer. So let's look at working longer. So let's work until 63. So we work a couple extra years longer, which means we're going to have more monthly contributions into our retirement plans. Plus, we're going to have the matches, right? His employer contribution is 5%. So he's going to get 5% into his, or a 5% match for longer. Now, he could probably increase his contribution a little bit, but we're just kind of leaving it all out as is. Now, their retirement date is 1/28. So they would be 63. So we go back to expenses now. We know that health insurance doesn't have to start until 128. Okay, still got to go to 2031 because that's when they're 65. But now we've shut the time frame on how long we're going to need to pay for health care. Okay, so we've eliminated a little bit of an expense. So we go back to their retirement. Now we're at 93. We're on track, right? So we worked a couple extra years. We lowered our expenses. The other thing we can look at too is go back to expenses. They want to start traveling. We put that at 2026. They're doing that right now. But if we're able to make our money last a little bit longer, what if we can travel a little bit more? So if we go to 2038, what does that do? Travel a couple extra years. It only dropped us by a year, 92. Still feel really good about that. And we got the house. So we're adjusting things. We're going to travel a little bit longer because we got to work a little bit longer than we expected, but we're going to claim Social Security at the right time and we're going to understand our expenses. And by understanding these three numbers, John and Ashley are going to have a confident retirement. We're going to get them to retirement. We're going to get them through retirement, and we're going to protect their ability to stay in retirement. All right. Thank you so much for watching today. God bless. Bye-bye. All right, I've got a couple. They're 61 and 60 years old. They have $375,000 saved for retirement. They're asking the question, can we retire? When can we retire? And how much money do we need saved to retire? That's what we're going to get in today. Me and Matt are going to go through a Your Financial EKG for you. Matt, let's go.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Welcome, everybody. This is Tom and Shannon. So Tom works for Georgia Pacific, and he is currently 61, wants to retire at 63. Shannon is working and wants to retire at 62. We did a plan for them. And the funny thing is, everything was fine. They were comfortable with it until Tom calls me a couple of months later and says, I lost my job. And then we had to go back and refigure a couple of additional scenarios, which is what we do to help our clients within a particular time frame. We did get a couple of things ironed out for him to make them comfortable going through retirement. So let's go through this. So we've got the income for Tom. Original plan is $113,000, wanting to retire at 63. So in 2026, Shannon was making $6,000 annually, wanted to retire in 2026, a couple of months later. On the Social Security side of things, they're both going to start their Social Security at the point that they retire. So we have this feature here. For those of you that watch the videos, you've seen this before. At full retirement age, Tom is here at $3,253. Shannon is here at $1,634. Now, if they take it early, as you realize, they're going to get a little bit of a haircut. So we'll see that reflected here, and we can adjust our time of when we want to take it. We can optimize it. There's a handful of things that we can do. In this scenario, we're just starting right off with the income because their concern was, I want to have a guaranteed stream of income. They were in fear for not having income.
Yeah, and keep in mind with Social Security, like Matt said, if you take it early, like at 62, if you're born after the year 1960, you get 70% of your benefit. Now, for each client, it's important that we go through the EKG to understand exactly when Social Security makes sense optimally for your plan, but also when it makes sense optimally personally. A lot of my clients have a fear about Social Security. Sometimes longevity is a concern. They say, hey, if I'm going to die early, or if my parents didn't live past their 80s, I want to take as much benefit as I possibly can now. Or they'll look at the fiscal deficit and say, hey, I see that we're going to be $20 trillion in debt. I want to take Social Security now. It's my money. I've paid into it. We also, in certain situations, make it a game time decision. Matt and I will look at a client and say, hey, listen, you've got about 2, 3, 4 years before you get to Social Security. I don't know what the stock market's going to do between now and then. I don't know what your asset value is going to be. So we'll have to do a game time decision. Do we do a pinch hitter and call in Social Security when you retire? Or do we live off our investments because the market's done really well? So sometimes, Matt, like you've talked about, it's kind of this song and dance and saying, okay, how's the market done, and when do we claim Social Security benefits?
So Tom and Shannon, neither one of them have a pension. Getting right back into it. Now, this is our income tab. We're going to jump over here to the asset tab, and we're going to take a look at where we are for assets. So here we can see, as Drew touched on earlier, at this point we're at 378, and they're trying to get to retirement next year. So they are putting some money away. Here Tom has a 401k. This is the current employer. There's 54,000 in there. He is currently making contributions into his 401k. He has a previous employer 401k with 256,800, obviously not making contributions into that one. Shannon has a Roth IRA with 33,300, and she is making contributions into that. And then she also has a traditional IRA with 16,000, and then they have a joint savings account with 18,000. So that's kind of how they're situated now. They do own a home. The value of it is $293. And then as we can see down here, we don't have any annuities. If they did, this is where it would be listed.
So right here, if you can look, you see tax analysis where Matt's mouse pointer is. They've got 86% of their money is what we would call qualified. You might be thinking, what is qualified money? 86% of Tom and Shannon's money is pre-tax, meaning somebody is going to take some taxes from this. Now, they live in the great state of Texas. God bless Texas, right? It actually, the country of Texas, as we should say, right? So they won't have a state tax. But from a federal level, if you take 86% of their money, right? Scroll back up real quick, Matt, to the assets. Let's add this up. I'll just use my calculator. Makes it easy. We've got 54,000, 256,000. So, and then Shannon's got 16 there. So we've got $326,000 that is going to have tax associated with it. So let's just use the federal levels where we're at today. Let's say 20% of that. That's $65,000 in taxes. So essentially, you could say out of their total assets or out of their total IRA assets, 65,000 of that's Uncle Sam's. So we've got to navigate that for them when it comes to their income distributions, and we'll get to that.
So now we're going to take a peek at where we are with expenses. So here we're seeing their current monthly expenses are $5,094. They do have a mortgage on the home to be paid off in 2051. They do have taxes and insurance on the home. The baseline expenses, this number, for those of you who aren't familiar, is where we kind of include all of the things that are regular monthly items. Don't really fluctuate that much. It's pretty consistent. It's not something that's going to get paid off like a car or a credit card. We'll list those items out individually. So we do have credit cards here of $500. Obviously, it's going to be paid off rather quickly. So then there it is. Health insurance is something that we will add in here. Sometimes people have an advantage plan. Sometimes they'll have a supplement. Sometimes the pension, if you happen to be an individual that has one, that can be included sometimes as the secondary. So we kind of list that out separately so that we can adjust those numbers. Yeah. Even though it's going to be a continual thing, like I just said, we don't wrap it necessarily into the baseline because it can change depending upon what we select.
One of the things that we do with our clients when it comes to their health insurance, especially, you remember you've got ACA, which is pre-65, and then you've got Medicare post-65. So Matt's talking post-65 Medicare. One of the things that we do for our clients is every year as they're going into their Medicare plan, we want to make sure, one, that if they're on a supplement, that their premiums are still the same, or if they do increase, we update their EKG for that increase. That's why we do the quarterly reviews with our clients for the EKG to make sure, hey, has your baseline expenses changed? Has your health insurance expenses changed? Have you spent more on travel, less on travel? Let's keep this updated because we want to make sure that we're on the right glide path. We're on the right track as we go through this. Now, listen, if you want a financial EKG, if you want to meet with Matt or myself, go to the description below. We've got a great link there. You just click that link. You get right on our calendar. Also, you could get the first 2 chapters of my new book for free go to the description, click on that, and you can download that and read that. But we talk about expenses in that book. The thing that is critical to your retirement is not necessarily how much money you have saved. We've talked about this on our channel a ton. It's not about how much you have saved, but it's how much you spend. You might have $1 million, but you might spend $100,000 a year and you are on a glide path to run out. Or you might have $300,000 and understand when you're going to claim Social Security, and you might spend another 25 on top of that, and you might never run out of money. It's all about cash flow. Cash is king, little k. Jesus is the real king. Cash is the little king. And so that's why we're looking at here on the expenses, and that's why we want to keep this updated.
That's a great point when you talk about the difference between someone with, more assets than someone else. But one of the biggest things is, like you were saying is how you spend it, or what your expenses are. And this is one area that's highlighted for a lot of clients don't realize what they're actually spending. So this is an eye opener, kind of like a tool to help you focus for a lot of folks. Some folks are dead on. They use, spreadsheet or what have you, but it's good. We walk through it. It takes a little bit of time, but this is a helpful tool. So for these folks, we are including some travel for them as well. And typically, people aren't going to be traveling into their 90s. So we'll run that out at some point. And again, some of these numbers are just what we feel at this point. We're trying to shoot and be a little bit conservative. We want to make sure that we're getting in the fun and the enjoyment of retirement that we want. But we also want to be realistic and realize that, we're not traveling overseas every single year when you're 92 years old, right? For most people. Some people do. But we'll put a date in to end it here, just like we would for a credit card or a mortgage. So I'm just pointing that out to you.
Difference with the travel and the mortgage, though, is that we do put inflation on the travel, because the cost of airline tickets today is different from cost of airline tickets 2 years from now. But the mortgage never changes. Now, your taxes and insurance inside the mortgage will change, and we usually separate that out. You can see that on line number 2 for Matt. That has inflation. But the mortgage, the amortization changes for principal and interest, but there's no inflation on that. And that's one of the biggest mistakes I see when we're running through expenses with clients is they'll send me their spreadsheet and they'll put 3% inflation on everything. And I'm going, wait a sec, your mortgage, your credit card debt, your student loan debt, none of that has inflation on it. And so we've got to kind of work through this to say, what is your individualized inflation rate? You can see for Tom and Shannon Oprah up there, it's 2.21%. Well, that's their individualized inflation rate. It's not 3.26, which is the 114-year average. It's individualized for them. And that's what we're trying to get. With the Your Financial EKG, we're trying to say, what is the individualized inflation rate for this couple, for you, right? And we'll get to a point where we'll say, what's the rate of return you need to earn on your investments in order to make this last? It's not about others, it's about you. And that's why we call it a your plan.
Exactly. Okay. They also have life insurance here and a fifth wheel, including storage. So we've got those pieces in here, again, with end dates on them. Now we're going to come over here to our cash flow tab. This is where we can show a number of different things, money coming in, money going out. In this particular case, we're showing them purchasing a new car in 2029 and then another new car in 2036. Money going out. These are the way that they handle their finances is they typically will finance their vehicles. So we're showing them financing it over a period of time with a $500 payment, and then they'll just fit the car to match that particular amount. So here we are in our pre-retirement tab. Pre-retirement, meaning we haven't yet retired, we are still working. So as we go through here, again, we can see where we are today at this $378,000. And when we get to retirement, they're at $448,000. So we're almost at $450,000 at the point that we retire. And then at the top, what we're seeing, we're kind of cheating and looking into the next tab, which is showing us, hey, our money's going to last until we're 97 and 96. That's what it is pretty good.
They have $450,000 projected out with a 5% rate of return, right? We're doing a very low conservative rate of return on our investment. So with the contributions, with the market rate of return, now they could get more than that. We could get 7 or
4. Yeah, they're at 4.
So they're even more. So you're even being, you're like the tortoise, and I'm kind of like the tortoise with a little bit of a rocket because I go to 5 and you go to 4. So at $450,000, with the spending that we just went through, understanding when we're going to claim Social Security, they run out of money at 97 and 96. So this, I think what I love about the financial EKG and what I love about what we do is that you don't have to have $3 million. Susie Orman's like, you got to have $3 million to retire. And the guy working at Georgia Pacific, who's putting in the hours, who's putting in the long days, he's never going to have $3 million unless he wins the Georgia lottery or the Texas lottery or whatever. Well, for Tom and Shannon, they've worked hard, they've saved, they understand their spending. And before we get to the retirement tab to go through all this, we can see at $450,000, they're going to run out at 97 and 96. Plus, they'll still have Social Security on their house. So to me, I look at that and go, that gives me some confidence. That gives me some freedom to know that I'm going to be okay.
Just to carry on with that thought is that's making the assumption that both of them are living to 97 and 96. So if something was to happen to one or the other, things would change. And again, another benefit of the EKG is we can reflect that. So we can show, hey, what if this happened? What if I got sick and I was, long-term care for a period of time? Or what if I passed? Or what if she passed? One or the other. And that we can kind of pop through that here in a minute. So on this particular tab, what we're just showing is this is the highlights of the particular year. We're going to show December, the month of December is each one of these horizontal lines running across. But we can open this up, and in the full report, when you get your EKG, you see more of this. But here you can see, here's the month of January through the month of December for 2024. And then we can go through 2025. So here you can see as we're going along, we can keep clicking till we get to 2026. And now we're getting into retirement. So in this particular scenario with Tom and Shannon, we're actually retiring in August. And you can see that the income stops for Tom. Shannon's continues for 2 more months, and then hers stops. So the next, when we get from September, then we go into October. October is going to be on the actual retirement tab because now they're both retired. So here we have Tom's Social Security coming in because remember on the first tab, we turned his Social Security on at retirement. And then we're going to do the same thing for Shannon, but hers won't be reflected until the following month. So as we look across, we can see, what might be withheld and put, contributions into certain accounts. So here we can see what they are actually contributing, which we saw on our second tab. When we come across here, we've got our net monthly income. So on our income tab, we're actually kind of reflecting what you'll see on your tax return. It has the salaries coming in, and then it also has the contributions going into your accounts, the withholdings for taxes, Social Security, and Medicare.
Yep. And then what we can also, if we have clients who are super duper detailed and they'll send us their W-2, and we can actually put their deductions for health insurance, life insurance, disability, if you get that coming out of your paycheck, if your spouse gets life insurance through your work, if your spouse gets health insurance or any other benefits. Sometimes we have stock purchase plans, things that come out of your check, because what we're trying to do on that net monthly income in the pre-retirement and the retirement is get it as close to the penny as we possibly can, knowing that's what's going to help us grow these retirement assets.
Yeah, we don't want to have any extra money showing up in here that is being withheld, and because that would actually add to your dollars, which it's not if you're buying something extra like vision or dental or something along those lines. So great point.
And that's, again, we want to try to be, and Matt, let's flip over to the retirement tab so we can get to that to show, because what I want to do is we want to try to be as detailed as we possibly can. It's like going into the doctor and going for blood work, right? If you go for blood work, right, and they take the blood out of your arm and I get the emails from LabCorp and I'm looking at them all and I'm like, I don't know what this is. Like, I don't understand. And I'm like Googling it. Next thing I know, I've got like a brain tumor, right? Because I'm like dying because my potassium's too high or something. But like, you go through these blood works and you want the doctor like when he reads it or she reads it, my doctor's a she, you want it to be as detailed as possible. And that's what we're looking at here is we're saying, okay, your triglycerides are this, and that is exactly what it means. Your potassium is here. I don't know anything else about blood work, but that's exactly because we want to make sure your body is working. And that's what we want for your finances too. It's the same thing. You don't want to work with an advisor, or you don't want to go into your retirement going, you know what? I'm going to be okay. I'm going to make it. I'm going to put my head in the sand and we'll be all right. It's like going to the doctor and he goes, well, hey, Matt, you look like you should be on Lipitor. And Matt's like, well, you didn't take my blood work. You didn't weigh me. You just thought, oh, he looks a little pudgy. He needs to be on cholesterol medicine. That's why we want to be detailed on this plan.
Yeah, so there's a couple different things when we're talking about the details. And I know you wanted to skip over to this page, but let me back up just for 1 second, because I think this is kind of important for some folks. When we look here, and this is going to highlight what we were talking about a minute ago about being specific with your income, is these green numbers here on our net monthly cash flow. This will reflect, obviously, this is good, green, good, extra money coming in. We need to find a home for this. However, if at the end of the month, you look at this report and you go, hey, I don't have $1,700 extra every month, then we need to go back and maybe we need to look again at your expenses. Is there something that we're spending money on that we forgot? Because we need to include all of our expenses. If this number is red in our pre-retirement, then we need to be concerned that our expenses might be too high, because obviously we're pulling money from our investments even before we've retired, which could end up in a problem. Yeah. So there's a couple of things that we go through here. We definitely would slow down when we see things like this. And if this is accurate and you go, oh, yeah, I'm actually taking the extra money and I put it into that other account, then we're okay. We need to reflect that. And we can certainly do that on our cash flow tab, and we can put the money from point A to point B. So just another detail of how specific the each EKG is and how beneficial it can be to help you realize where you are. So again, I'm showing them with a 4% return on the investments that are in the market. So fairly conservative number. And the first thing that we see, the red, right? Everybody looks at the red and they're like, hey, hang on, what's going on? I got red. But it is, like you said earlier, a good thing, 97, 96. So we're getting out there, and it's telling us that we need 3.98%. And you might think to yourself, well, why is it red 3.98 if you're showing 4? Well, that's a great question. So when we come back here to our assets and we come down here to where we actually plugged in that 4%, well, right here, this bank, even though they have the savings that might be getting 4% right now, that's only until they retire. And that was in 2026. So after retirement, maybe that savings account, they don't have that opportunity to get 4. So we just cut it down to 2. What that means is now they're not earning 4% on everything, which is why it's telling us, hey, you know what? We need to get 3.98% to get us to 100.
100. Yeah, because the bank account, what we're looking at today is we have higher rates at the recording of this video, but we're assuming over time that CD rates are going to come down.
So again, just trying to be detailed, trying to make sure we're not assuming, hey, you're going to do 8 to 10% because you did that last year. It's going to be great. Have a nice life. That's not the way that we look at it.
Rainbows and unicorns are great. My daughter loves rainbows and unicorns, but Matt and I deal in more thunderstorms. And that's where we live. Now, I believe in being positive, and I'm a very optimistic person. But when we're doing a financial plan for a client, when you're looking at your retirement, you want to say, and I say this all the time, if my retirement gets kicked in the shins, is it still going to last? If the market drops, and we'll go through the market tab here in just a second, but if the market goes down multiple years in a row, sequence of return risk, based on my income, based on my taxes, based on what I need in retirement, am I still going to be okay? And that's why and what you should do when you're projecting out your retirement is always, always, always go with a lower rate of return. I'll get people commenting on the channel and they'll say, well, Drew, I put all my money in JEPI and I get 9% a year. And I'm like, that's great. But last time I checked, all our eggs in one basket is not always the best thing to do especially with an investment that's only been out since 2020. But anyway, I digress. Go ahead, Matt.
And not everybody's has the same risk tolerance. Some people can't stomach volatility, right? So here, now we're going to say, here's 2026, right? So now we're in retirement, and we had 2026 on the last tab as well. But when we look at this one, all of these zeros is because this is our pre-retirement, and now we're in, retirement. So here we're showing Tom starting his Social Security, and then here is Shannon showing her Social Security as we're going along. And then you'll notice there's no income, and this particular tab has turned to pension because we're in retirement, but there is no earned income coming in.
Yeah.
So here we're reflecting the same income previously because we want to show the total here for the net monthly income. But really what we're looking at as we're going along in retirement, it's only going to be this 15,000 for the remainder of the year. Here total, we're at 69,000 of net income for the year. The expenses are 59,000. So, the difference in those two numbers means that we're positive. Well, we've got, the green numbers here, which we looked at from before. Now that we're in retirement, we can see we are pulling from our investments. Now, if we look to the far right, this column says spendable assets. Spendable assets is the same number, the same accounts with the same values from our tab 2, which was the asset one. Here, we are going to be drawing down on these accounts. And one thing to pay attention to is we can draw from these accounts in different orders, a different withdrawal order. The way that this is situated right now is we are pulling from these qualified accounts first. The Roth is down here, and then we have another traditional IRA down here. Now, once we get done with setting this up, we would probably want to move the Roth down one more notch. Just depends on where we are and depends on what we're trying to do with taxes. But that gets more into the strategy of things. So we'll come back to that at a later point.
This video could be 15 hours long as we go through with client reviews. But for Tom and Shannon, as we're going through a quarterly review with them, we might say, okay, Tom, Shannon, you guys are retired. Hey, Shannon, that little IRA you got, why don't we try to convert that to a Roth IRA? And so we're drawing down Tom's 401k, or at this point, it would be an IRA because we've rolled it to an IRA. But Shannon's account will say, hey, Shannon, why don't we convert this to a Roth IRA, try to get that completely off the table and make that all tax-free. And then based on, where we're at with our income and how we're drawn, we may go to Tom the next year and say, hey, Tom, we converted Shannon 17. Now let's look at taking 15 to 20 of your old 401k. Let's roll that to a Roth IRA. Because again, with the national debt, where it's at, and we're looking at the year 2026, they're dying, let's assume, in the year 2059. So the year before they run out of money in 2059. Well, where's our national debt going to go? Where are taxes going to go? So as we're going through these reviews with clients, that's where we're implementing some more of the intricate strategies. The first thing you want to figure out when you're trying to retire is, listen, can I retire? Am I going to be okay? That's what everybody wants to know. Can I retire and will I run out of money? Then once we figure that out, then we can go, okay, let's do the tax planning. Let's do the Roth conversion. Let's do the withdrawal order. Let's look at your legacy and your charitable giving and all of that. And then we go through even more detail.
And a great point with what you're just saying is when we have our initial conversation with you, we're going to find out what's important to you. So as we're going through, the order in which we address things might be different from client to client based on what is actually important. So what Drew was just talking about, it might not be that important to you to look at a Roth. Maybe it is. The Roth is something that can be highlighted when we look at our RMD tab, the required minimum distribution tab, and it'll kind of tell us, hey, you know what? We're being forced to take income. Maybe we need to look at that. So that might be higher on the list once we determine, hey, is my money going to last? Because if the money doesn't last and the money's going to run out at age 79, we're not really that concerned with converting to a Roth at this point. We need to be focused on how can we make that money last? So high level, looking at this particular page, which again, we are on the retirement tab here, so we can see that. And what we'll see, just kind of looking over all of these confusing looking numbers, is there's a group of numbers here, $500. There's another $500 here. These are just the little buckets where we are withdrawing monthly cash flows going out. See the negative number for our vehicles. So when we go and put things into our cash flows, you're going to see it show up, and then it's going to turn on and turn off. So it's going to be very specific to what we're doing. And it doesn't mean when we make a plan, hey, it's October in 2029, we need to go down and buy a car. It just means, hey, we're trying to put that money in because we know we're going to need another vehicle. So we want to show the expense going out. We want to show the tax repercussion in your numbers for that particular year. And maybe if we're planning on doing Roth conversions, maybe we're grabbing that money, and instead of doing a conversion, we'll just use that for the car at that point. There's a lot of different ways to peel the onion, if you will. Looking through here, obviously everything is working out as we're going along, but you can see the spendable asset column is dropping as we're going along. And that's because of the red here in our net monthly cash flow, because that's what we need in order to put gas in the minivan. So going on down the line, we can see that at some point, these numbers start to change. So we drop off here in 2040. There's a reduction in our expenses. So obviously we can see, oh, well, you know what? The car was just paid for. So now the number drops back down. And then as we go along, we get into like here, 2050, 2051, it drops pretty significantly. What happens here? Well, that's the house being paid off. So those things are reflected in our report here at the end.
So what concerns us, 2051 is they're 88 and 87 years old. But if you go over to the spendable assets there, they've got only $23,229 in spendable assets at 88 and 87. Your most vulnerable time in life, right? You don't want to go work at Walmart as a greeter. Again, nothing wrong with Walmart. I got a lot of clients that work there. And my wife's mom actually worked at Sam's Club. But what we're trying to say is you don't want to go work at that age. So what we need to do for Tom and Shannon, and Matt's going to go to this next scenario. Go click on scenarios real quick at the very top. Well, we want to show, so Tom and Shannon were really concerned about guaranteed income because they don't have pensions, and they've got a lower asset value later in life. So they're saying we need cash flow that's guaranteed to never run out. So even if our assets go away, our cash flow is going to be there. So we have to go to our toolbox and say, what can give us a guaranteed income? Now click on that scenario number 2. For them, go to assets. For them, Tom's going to work a little bit of part-time, but we're also going to add in an annuity. And the reason we're going to do the annuity is not because we're trying to sell this person an annuity. I don't care if we use an annuity or not. Matt doesn't care. But for them, they said, we want guaranteed income. And the only thing out there, and you can Google it all you want, that offers guaranteed income outside of Social Security or pension is an annuity. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put $200,000 into an annuity to give them guaranteed income. Now, it could be more, it could be less for your situation. But what we're trying to say is, you might go to the doctor and one of your main concerns might be a loss of movement in your joints or something. Your doctor might say, well, in order to alleviate this, you need to start taking some turmeric. So this is us saying, okay, this is your turmeric. If you want to do it, great. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. We'll find another route that will bring you some confidence in your retirement.
And this page right here is showing exactly what you were just describing. So taking the 200,000, which is the number that we're showing, pulling it from the Fidelity 401k and taking that number and plugging it in down here into that annuity, which says income benefit base here. We can see that when we're on the asset tab here, it says 256,000. Down here on the annuity line, it's actually showing a 0 on account value because we haven't actually moved the funds in, but it does show the start date of when we're going to start taking that income, and we can project it to be whatever date we would like. So that is reflected out here. We can see here is that annuity starting to kick in at this point.
Now, and look at what they did to their spendable assets retirement fund analysis. Actually, at 101 and 100, there's money left in the accounts. Now, keep in mind, Tom's going to work a little bit of part-time. He's a guy that doesn't like to sit down. And so he's going to go work at Lowe's a little bit. And we just said Lowe's, but he's a very handy guy. He can do whatever he wants. But adding in the guaranteed income is giving them some confidence knowing, hey, we're going to have assets later in our life. And it's more about cash flow at that point.
We kind of have our income coming in and we have our expenses. So you'll see that there is income, even though the expenses and our dollars might run out. And here we get pretty tight in our 80s. Again, we were tight as it was. But what we wanted to make sure of for them was that there was the guaranteed income amount coming in. So their net monthly income here, as we see it, is showing up, right along, and that's perfect. And it's because it's Social Security and because it's the annuity, we have a comfort with that. So the comfort that you see here versus our expenses, assuming our expenses stay the same, and if we're shooting slightly high on our expenses, making sure we're covering everything, get the cars in there and the vacations in there and the health insurance, we can always round up as opposed to trying to hit the exact number. On the return side, we want to shoot slightly lower. But again, here we have the income number, which is guaranteed more than the account value or more than the expense side of things, which allows this number to grow because we go back into the green at the end of each month at this section. So that's going to help them. Even if these accounts went to zero, they do have the income because now it's guaranteed. And then they, on the expense side, assuming it stays the same, they're going to be okay. Now, the protected asset, you might see this number and go, hey, there's another $300,000-$400,000 there. That is the money that is in their house. So the money that's from the house is here. They would have to sell the house in order to gather those assets. And likely at that point in time, they would not be able to live in the same type of place that they're in for that amount of money just because of the inflation on housing and stuff like that.
What we're trying to do with Tom and Shannon is just get a plan that gets us to a starting point, gives them confidence as they go over the next few years before they step into retirement, and allows us as the financial advisors to create a baseline and then work with that baseline. Are these plans perfect? No. Is the stock market perfect? Is inflation perfect? No. But what we've done is we've created the baseline that we can start working with. Tom and Shannon might get to 63 years old and they might say, hey, we can't retire because of this, and this. Something might have changed. And as we're adjusting it, they might have to work a little longer. Tom said he's going to work at Lowe's. But for you and your individualized plan, we want to have a baseline, somewhere to start. And then from there, we can adjust as time. The worst thing is we go at 65 years old, we go, hey, we're going to retire. And then all of a sudden we can't. At least for Tom and Shannon, we now know, hey, this is what has to happen for us to get to where we want to be. And if we don't, we know what steps we need to take. When do we need to claim Social Security? Do I need to work a little bit part-time? Should we cut out expenses? And that is what formulates the full Your Financial EKG. And listen, if you want to meet with us, go to the description below, click on the calendar link, get on our calendar. Let's build out a Your Financial EKG for you. All right. Well, hey, thank you so much for watching Matt and I. We hope you've enjoyed it. God bless. Bye-bye. If you don't understand these practical tips, you might fail at retirement. So I want to go through a Your Financial EKG, a comprehensive financial plan with you today to keep you from failing in retirement. All right, here we go. We've got John and Sandy Simple. Now, John and Sandy are retired. They came to me, they said, hey, Drew, we need a Your Financial EKG. We have retired, but we're having some difficulty in retirement. Now, I would have loved to do their financial plan before they retired, so we didn't have to deliver such hard news during their retirement, but there are changes that they could make, and there are changes that they did make to turn this failed retirement into a successful retirement. So the first failure that we're going to look at today for John and Sandy is the failure to understand when you claim Social Security benefits. Most of the time, when you go to claim Social Security benefits, you're going to claim those benefits when you retire. The average retirement age here in America is 64 years old. Most individuals will claim Social Security benefits immediately. Now, if you retire earlier than 64, let's say you claim Social Security benefits at 62, you're going to get 70% of your full retirement benefit. If you claim Social Security at 67, you're going to get 100% of your full retirement benefit. And if you wait until 70, if you're an overachiever, a broccoli eater, you'll get 124% of your Social Security benefit. Now, here's the failure that I want to show you with John and Sandy. They are deciding when they should claim Social Security. And according to their plan, they're going to claim Social Security at 67, which means they would get 100% of their full retirement benefit. So let's look at this. So they're both retired, okay? They're both 61 years old. Now, John has a primary Social Security benefit at 67 of $3,000 a month. Sandy has a primary Social Security benefit at 67 of $2,400 a month. So they both worked, they both paid into the Social Security system, and they've got a pretty good Social Security check coming at 67. We're going to go right to retirement, okay? Because all we're concentrating on right now is when should they claim Social Security benefits. So when we go to retirement, this shows us when they're going to run out of money. Now, we're going to go through all the different stages of this to make sure they can retire, but here's what I want to show you. They're 61 years old. They need about $6,000 a month from their retirement investing accounts. That's $429,000. Okay, it's a lot of money. And again, we're going to go through all this, so hang on. But if you look, they want to delay Social Security until 67. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years of delaying Social Security. They're going to kick it on at 67. By that time, they would have drained most of their assets, and they're out of spendable assets at 69. Now, they still have this house right here, but they're out of their investments. Their retirement investment accounts are zero at 69 years old. Now, when we were having our conversation, I said, why are you waiting to claim Social Security at 67? And they said, well, hey, Drew, everyone tells us when we talk to financial planners or we read financial news or we watch financial channels, they say, live off your retirement investing accounts, delay Social Security. It's a guaranteed check. Guaranteed, right? With a COLA increase. I don't know, maybe after 2033, we'll see. Delay it. And so they were of the assumption that they would spend down their assets and take Social Security. Now, what that does is that leaves them with little wiggle room. And what do I mean by wiggle room? I mean that leaves them little retirement investments if their house needs a new roof or a new air conditioner, or they need a new car, or they want to bless their grandchildren, or they want to travel. They're literally draining their accounts to get to Social Security because of what they've heard and read. Let me show you something a little different. So what I like to do is say, okay, what if we change when you decide to take Social Security? You're 61 years old. Why don't we look at what the most optimal time for you to claim Social Security is? Remember, if you claim it early, you're not penalized in the sense of no one's going to shame you for it. I'm certainly not going to shame you for it. I'm just going to say, hey, when does it make the most sense for you to take Social Security? So let's look at this. Remember, his Social Security is $3,000 a month at 67. Sandy's is $2,400 at 67. Now, the software optimally says take it at 62 for both of them. So it'd be $2,100 for John and $1,680 for Sandy. That's 70% of their full retirement benefit. Now, on the current scenario, claiming at 67, waiting until their full retirement age, they're out of spendable assets at 69 years old. If we adjust their Social Security and we take it at 62, $2,100 and $1,680, our money lasts until 79. That's 10 years. Now that's totally against a lot of articles and financial pundits and people out there. But for them, it made sense to take it at 62. It gave them 10 years. And by the time they get to 80, who knows what's going to happen at that point? So, retirement failure number one was not understanding when they should claim their Social Security benefits. So, we checked that off. Now we're moving on. All right, let me interject something real quick. I know we're talking about retirement failure, but I want you to understand that when you make a money decision, if you make a bad money decision and it hurts your retirement or it hurts your investments, that is not an indication of the person that you are. I've made poor decisions in life. You've made poor decisions in life. And so our money decisions do not define who we are. What we want to do is pick ourselves up and continue moving forward. And I love the scripture. 1 Peter 4:19 says this. It says, trust your lives to God, for He will never fail you. So my encouragement in the midst of this video is to trust your lives to God, for He will never fail you. All right, retirement failure number two is this: not understanding your expenses, not understanding how to organize, designate your expenses. I want to look at this because your expenses, what you need in retirement income, is going to be crucial in understanding how long your retirement investment accounts are going to last, as well as what rate of return or distribution yield or interest we need to make on our retirement investing accounts to distribute the amount of income that we need in order to sustain our retirement life. Now, I like to call this the guardrail rule. When you have a retirement investing account, say a 401k, an IRA, a portfolio of multiple different accounts, when we run a Your Financial EKG, we are going to determine the exact amount of rate of return or interest or yield that portfolio needs to distribute in order to make your money last until whatever age you want it to last. That's called the guardrails. So let's assume that your portfolio needs to earn 5% to make your money last. Well, if you're in a money market account or you're in CDs or your money's in the bank and you're earning 2%, that's not going to help you moving forward. Vice versa, if you're trying to earn 9, 10, 11, 12% and you're taking a lot of risk, that could throw you over the guardrail and wreck your retirement. We really want to allocate our investments and situate them for exactly the rate of return that we need. Keep in mind, we're not always going to make 5%. Maybe we make 6, 7, 8, 9% in a good year. But what we're trying to do is protect ourselves in a down year. What if the market goes down 10 or 15%? How am I protected? Now, let's go back to expenses and let's talk about how all of that commingles to give you retirement success and not retirement failure. So here we are. We're still with John and Cindy, or Sandy, not Cindy, sorry. And we want to look at this in two different ways. A lot of times people will call me and they'll just say, hey, Drew, my retirement expenses are $6,000 a month. And so we look at that and they go, okay, they're $6,000 a month. And they have a spreadsheet of their expenses at $6,000 a month with inflation at 3.27%, which is wonderful. You want to calculate inflation on your expenses. But my question is, do all of your expenses have the same inflation rate? Do the groceries and your taxes and your mortgage and your auto loan, do all of those have the same inflation rate? Because we need to find out what your individualized inflation rate is so you can build out a retirement income plan that has inflation and expenses that are designated for you, not just on some Excel spreadsheet, but are specific to you and how that money is going to grow over time. Remember, God's greatest gift outside of Jesus is compound interest. It works really well in our 401ks and our IRAs, but it works the opposite way on inflation. So if we can understand what our exact inflation rate is, that's going to give us a better way to project out our rate of return needed on our retirement investing accounts, thus the retirement income we need. Does that all make sense? Good. All right, so let's look at this. So for them, John and Sandy, they're saying they need $6,000 in current monthly expenses. Well, if we look at this, we go to retirement, they're out of money at 68 years old. Remember, not adjusting their Social Security had them out at 69. So if we just throw in their expenses, gosh, that doesn't really do us any good. What we want to do when it comes to expenses is we want to break them down. So let's look at this. This is how we break it down. So they've got their mortgage of $1,100 a month. Now, the mortgage has zero inflation on it, right? So your mortgage payment's your mortgage payment. Now, your taxes and your insurance inside of your mortgage payment could go up. Now, what I like to do when I've had a mortgage is I've separated the two. I have my mortgage payment and I have my taxes and insurance separate, so I can keep a good calculation of those payments. You might have it all in together to make it easy for you. That's great. I'm not telling one way is bad or good. I'm just saying how I do it. So when we break it out for a client, I want to know what is just your principal and interest, because that payment's not going to change. Now, the amount that goes to principal, the amount that goes to interest will change over the life of your amortization schedule or the life of your loan, but it's not going to go from $1,100 to $1,200 or $1,100 to $900 unless you're dumping on a bunch of money onto principal and you're recasting your loan. So mortgage for them is $1,100 and there's no inflation, right? So we can already see that their average inflation rate is down to 2.67%. Remember, they were telling me it's $6,000 with 3.27% inflation. But when we start to break it down, well, the first payment doesn't have inflation. So we got to calculate that. So they're going to continue making those payments until 2043. So that's when that payment ends. So we want to understand when our expenses are going to end, because they're going to basically go down, right? When you get into retirement, you usually spend a lot more up front and you spend less as time goes on, unless there's some health issues and things like that. Now, their baseline expenses are $3,600. Now, this is where taxes and insurance on their mortgage come in, car insurance, food and gas, bowling league, whatever you guys do in perpetuity, things that are never going to end, your golf membership, pickleball, whatever, this is in perpetuity. So this has normal inflation on it, right? Like a bell pepper at Publix or at Walmart is going to have inflation. So we want to calculate that in. That's going to never end, right? When you're 95, you still want to eat. So we need to calculate that. Health insurance, big cost that's not calculated. So for them, we've broken that out. It's $800 a month. And we're going to go until they're 65 years old. They're going to be on the exchange, and we're calculating inflation on that. Medicare cost, we dropped it down about $100 based on current pricing for Medicare supplements in Part D. Again, inflation on that, and that's going to go from 65 in perpetuity, right? Medicare goes on forever. Now, you might be on a Medicare Advantage plan, which has no monthly premium, but there's copays, deductibles, and costs that are incurred in that, and we would want to calculate that in as well. For them, they want to go with a supplement plan, usually plan N as in Nancy or G as in George, because they want to have a little bit more certainty when it comes to their healthcare costs and expenses. Plus, they've got some healthcare issues. They want to make sure that they don't have to worry about the doctors and the networks and all that. So we're doing the supplement, okay? They also want to travel, and they want to spend about $500 a month or $6,000 a year on travel with inflation, right? Airplane costs more today than it did the other day. And we're going to do that for 10 years. So you can see how we've broken these expenses down. Now, when we go back to retirement, it doesn't do a whole lot of good. It gives us about an extra year before we're out of money. Keep in mind, we're going to go through the changes on this to bring them from a failed retirement to a successful retirement. So just hang on right there. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to break this down. So now we know their current monthly expenses after tax, $6,000, right? But their inflation rate's 2.67, and this is going to fall off eventually. This $1,100 will fall off eventually. We understand our health care costs better. Those are going to adjust, and our travel is going to fall off. So once we get past 69, once we've made these adjustments and their money lasts into their 90s, we have a better expense schedule. We understand better how we need to spend our retirement income. Thus, when do we need to start our Social Security? Where does our retirement income investments, how do they need to be situated? What's our withdrawal schedule? All that fun stuff. But again, we failed at retirement. We're making the changes so that we don't fail. Now listen, if you want a Your Financial EKG, if you want a comprehensive retirement plan, go to the link below. Get in touch with us. There's a great download. You can download in the link as well. get that, say, yes, I want to visit with Pearl Wealth Group, a member of our team, and we'll put together an EKG for you to get you to retirement, through retirement, and protect your ability to stay in retirement. All right, let's go through the last failure for John and Sandy Simple. And this one's probably going to be the hardest one for you to digest, which is why I saved it for the end, so that you maybe have watched 2/3 of this video and you're not going to turn me off. Because remember, we're going to go through the changes for John and Sandy. We're going to show you what we did to turn this retirement into a success. So hang on. So the last failure for John and Sandy was they retired too soon. Now, I know that we all want to get retired. We all want to get to that point where we can enjoy what we have saved for. But for them, based on their current expenses, based on their lifestyle, based on their specific goals and dreams and where they live and everything going on in their life, they retired too soon. And let me show you why that is. So here we go. We got John and Sandy, and they're retired. They're 61 years old. Now, even if we decide to take Social Security at 62, which would delay this for another 10 years, they're still out of money at 69 years old. So what we need to do is we need to adjust John and Sandy. John works for Costco. He makes $55,000 a year. Sandy's a nurse. She makes about $110,000 a year. We need to look at pushing these ages, because there's two things that are going to happen. They're going to be able to continue to cover their expenses with their salaries, hence delaying income coming out of their retirement investments. We're going to delay Social Security a little bit if we work past 62, 63, so that'll give them a bigger Social Security check. And they're going to be able to add to their retirement investment accounts. So if you look, they have 401ks. And so we'll be able to add to these if we are not retired, right? We can contribute, and we're going to get a company match. So let's take out this for a second, and let's just assume they continue working. So $55,000 for John, $110,000 for Sandy. Now, we're going to work, let's see what happens if we work for just another year. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip putting money into the contribution side, because I'm going to go to that on the changes. I just want you to see holistically what happens if they decide to work just one extra year. So we go to retirement. Look at this. Now they're out at 76. Remember, it was 69. So if they retire just 1 year later, and maybe we delay Social Security until we retire, now we're out at 76. Okay, let's look at one more thing. What if we go an extra year? Let's say we go to 63. And I know you hate it. You're probably commenting right now, Drew, I want to retire now and spend my money and bounce the last check on the day I die. I know that. But I don't want you to fail at retirement. So I'm just showing you options, right? Now look at this. Making no changes, they're out of money at 94. Just working an extra couple years. And here's what I also want to show you. Guardrail rule. Remember we talked about the guardrail rule. The rate of return needed for John and Sandy to avoid a shortfall is 5.35%. Now we're running this portfolio at a 4% rate of return, which is pretty conservative compared to the market. The market's averaged about 8% with inflation the last 50 years. We're running at 4, half, which to me, that's pretty conservative. And I feel like that's a good projection. Now, I know you can get 6, 7%. You're going to comment below the ETF that you're using that's going to give you 6% guaranteed forever. But what if it doesn't? What if the market doesn't do what we expect it to do? What if the market doesn't have a really good decade like it had the last 10, 20 years? What happens? Well, we've projected out a low rate of return, and we'll feel confident. So for them, 5.35% is what they need to earn to feel confident in retirement, which is pretty low, right? Now, let's look at the changes. So let's go to the changes for John and Sandy. Let's get them from failed to success, right? Now, John is going to stay in retail. Sandy's going to stay as a nurse. They're going to continue to earn their salaries. They're going to work until 63 years old. Now, they're going to delay Social Security until they're 63. So when they turn 63, boom, we're going to turn on Social Security. So for John, it would be $2,250. For Sandy, it would be $1,800. Okay, so they're taking it at 63. From an asset standpoint, we're going to continue to contribute to our 401ks, and you can see we're getting the matches, right? There's a 3% match for Sandy. For John, he's getting a 3% match as well. So we're going to get that free money, we're going to contribute, and we're going to get the free money from the company. Isn't that wonderful? They've got bank, $25,000 in the bank. Obviously, that ain't earning a whole lot. So we come down here, we've got $477,000 in spendable assets, and we have a house that's worth $450,000. Now, their expenses haven't changed. What we've done is we've been able to break these out. Okay, so here's $1,100 for our mortgage. $3,600 is our baseline. That's their food, gas, taxes, insurance. Here's our health insurance. Now, keep in mind, their health insurance is going to start 2 years later. They were taking it at 61. Now it's going to start at 63. So they really have from 63 to 65. So 2 years of exchange-covered health insurance. And then they go on Medicare. So we've shortened the amount of time they need to pay for health insurance. What, $800 times 12? That's $9,600 a year. Multiply that by 2. That's let's just say $20,000 with inflation. We've saved them $20,000 of healthcare costs by working a couple extra years. Again, I'm not telling you to stay in a crappy job that you don't like. In this example, John could go work somewhere else that he enjoys. Sandy, she's a nurse. She has a special qualifications that she could go work somewhere else that she enjoys better. And you might be working at Citibank or at, I don't know, Starbucks or whatever, and you might not enjoy what you do. And you might say, well, Drew, can I make $50,000? Can I make $30,000 instead of the $100,000 or instead of the $80,000 I'm making now? What will that do? Yeah, we need to look at that so that you can enjoy your life as well as enjoy your retirement. So travel, $500. We're delaying that till 2026. Now, they can travel beforehand if they want. Obviously, they've been taking vacations and things. We're trying to get their retirement costs. Now, we go to pre-retirement. So now, look at this, 61 and 62, they're continuing to add into their 401ks. We go to retirement, and essentially, we're out of money at 94 years old. Now, we have the house that we can do a reverse mortgage on. We could sell, move somewhere else. But we've put ourselves in a really good spot to be out of money at 94. And we've given ourselves some wiggle room. Look at this, 82 and 85, which is kind of mortality tables today. At 82, they've got $341,000. At 85, we have $303,000 because now we're talking about things like long-term care, assisted living, and we want to protect that, okay? So we've gone from a retirement that is tough, right? It's a failure to a retirement that is successful. And there's other things that we can put into place in order for this retirement to last well into their 100s, which hopefully they live a long, healthy, happy retirement and they go home to be with the Lord at a very old age. All right. Well, hey, thank you so much for watching. I hope this has helped. God bless. Bye-bye. 3 reasons that you should collect Social Security at 62. That's what we're going to talk about today on the Your Financial EKG YouTube channel. And the first reason why you should claim Social Security at 62 is because you need the Social Security income now. And what do I mean by that? I mean, you need retirement income now at age 62. Let me show you an easy example. Let's say that your Social Security is $2,000 a month at age 62. Okay? So that means that you would get $24,000 a year in Social Security benefits starting at age 62. Now, what we want to look at is, what would Social Security be if we waited until age 67? So at 67, Social Security, if you're getting $2,000 at 62, at 67, it would be $2,857 at 67. That's a total of $34,284. Now, the difference between these two ages is at age 62, you get 70% of your full retirement benefit. So if you were born in the year 1960 or after, and you claim Social Security at age 62, you're going to get 70% of your full retirement benefit. If you wait until age 67, you're going to get 100% of your full retirement benefit. Now, if you decide to wait until age 70, you're actually going to get 124% of your full retirement benefit. Now, for this example, what we're looking at is taking it at 62 because we need the income now. So let's use an easy example. So we're age 62 and we take Social Security right away. So that's $2,000 a month, $24,000 a year. Now, without COLAs and without increases in our Social Security payment, let's just assume between ages 62 and 67, how much money is that? That's $120,000 in retirement income between the ages of 62 and 67. Now, if you were to have waited until age 67, you would have got $2,857 per month, or $34,284 a year. Now, the question becomes, how long does it take to make up between those two areas? Meaning, how many years does it take to break even if I would have claimed later? So take this number, 34,284, and divide that into the $120,000 that you've already received. And that equals 3.5 years. So once you reach age 70, you've made up for it. Now, the question really becomes, why do I want to take Social Security at 62? Is because you need this income now for cash flow. It's not about how long it takes you to make up. That's what most of the financial articles look at. How long does it take you to make up if you delay? What's your break-even point? But if you're claiming Social Security at 62, it's probably because you're retiring at 62 or at 61 or 60 or earlier, and you need the immediate income now so that your investments don't deplete. We're going to talk about that in reason number 3 to claim Social Security at 62. And when determining whether you should claim Social Security at 62 or not, we want to make sure we're putting this into a comprehensive financial plan, which we call a Your Financial EKG, to determine how am I going to get to retirement, how am I going to get through retirement, and how am I going to protect my ability to stay in retirement. And if you want a financial EKG, go to the description below. But one of the principles that we put into our financial EKG, the 3-16 principle. We want 3 forms of income based around 6 areas of our financial life built into one comprehensive financial plan. And I know another great verse with a 3:16, John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believes in him will not perish, but have everlasting life. The second reason you want to claim Social Security at 62 is the risk of longevity in your family, or the lack thereof, meaning you're worried that you're going to die early, or you have a health concern that could cause you to die early. So let me show you what that looks like in black and white. All right, so here we go. Here's age 62, and our Social Security is $2,000 a month, okay? Or $24,000 a year. Now remember, if you're claiming Social Security at 62, you're getting 70% of your full retirement benefit. But let's say you claim at 62 and this person lives to age 75. How much in total benefits are they receiving based on the $24,000? Well, they would get $312,000 in total benefits. And simply stated, it's 24,000 multiplied by 13 years. Now, again, we're not giving Social Security any kind of COLAs. We're not giving any kind of updates to that. We're just saying simply $24,000 a year multiplied by 13 gives us the $312,000. Now, let's say you claimed at age 67. Same longevity. So we're going to go to 75. But if we claim at 67, we would get $2,857 a month in Social Security benefit, or $34,284 per year. Okay. Now, if you multiply that out over 8 years, right? 5 years in our 70s, 3 years in our 60s, that's 8 years. That is equal to $274,727. That's a really bad 2 right there. And so basically what I did was I took $34,284. I multiplied that by 8. That's 8 years of life. And that gave me the $274,727. Now the difference is take the 312, subtract that from the 274,727, and let's just pull out a handy dandy calculator. I really got to get a writing tablet. Somebody said that in the comments the other day. If you got any suggestions for writing tablets, put that in the comment section. 727, that's a difference of $37,273. So claiming Social Security at 62, if you have longevity or if you have health concerns, is a real eye-opener to think about it mathematically. Now, I always like to think of things from a faith-based standpoint too, and Proverbs 3 verses 7 and 8 say this: do not be wise in your own eyes, fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. So if you're someone who's struggling with their health or sickness, I hope that verse brings you some encouragement. All right, the third reason we want to claim Social Security at 62 is because we want to protect our retirement investments. There may be a situation in your retirement where the stock market goes down. You lose money in the stock market. I know that is mind-blowing to think about because people comment on the channel all the time. I'm averaging 10% annually in my investments, but there will come a day when you will lose money in the stock market. It's called sequence of return risk. And simply stated, sequence of return risk is the risk that you go into retirement, or there is a time frame in your retirement where the stock market falls 1, 2, maybe even 3 years in a row. And so for those 3 years that the market is going down, you're still needing to live life. You can't just pause living life because the stock market's losing money. No, you still have to go to the grocery store. You still got to put gas in your car. You still have to pay your doctor bills, your co-pays. You still got to get a root canal. And so when the market goes down, we might have to adjust when we claim Social Security to save our retirement investments from depleting too soon. Let me show you what that looks like. All right, so let's use a really easy example to show why you would want to claim Social Security at 62 if the stock market is going down. Let's look at this. So we have a 61-year-old. They have $1 million in their 401k. They've got $50,000 in annual expenses, and their Social Security at 62 is $2,000 a month. So there's really two options at this point. If they want to retire at 62, now their investments, they've lost 10% in a year. Their 401k is $900,000. They need $50,000 a year to live. And so that $50,000 has to come from their retirement investments, or it's got to come from Social Security, or a combination of both. So if they decide to take all of that $50,000 out of this $900,000, what would that do versus adding in Social Security at age 62? So let's look at this. If we take $50,000 a year from this $900,000, that is essentially taking 5.5% out of our 401k assets. And by doing that, we are bringing down the amount of money that's in our 401k and the ability for it to recover. That's called sequence of return risk. Let me show you exactly what I mean by that, and then we'll come back to this example. So this is an investment recovery calculator, and what this shows us is how long it takes for our money to recover based on a rate of return. So let's say your investment was worth $1 million, and we're using $1 million because it's an easy round number. Now, let's say our expected annual rate of return is 6%. So that means we're expecting to earn 6% in the market over the long term, and that our current value is $900,000. Okay? We're not contributing anymore because we're not working, we're retired, and our inflation rate is 3%. That's what the national average is over the last 114 years. So let's calculate this. Okay, so I want you to read this with me and understand what this is saying. Our original investment was $1 million. Adjusted for inflation, your original investment of $1 million will be recovered within 5 years, 5 years, if the investment return is 6%. If it does better and you get 7%, that's a 4-year recovery. However, if it only earns 5%, it's going to take 7 years to recover. Now, what is this article not showing us? Well, we are pulling out $50,000 a year in retirement income from our investment. That's not being calculated in, so this recovered within is actually going to be longer. It's like a hamster on a wheel. Now, you might say, well, Drew, I can average 10% in the market per year. Well, the market just went down 10%, so you ain't averaging 10%. But let's look at that. Okay, 2 years. That's a lot better than 5, but you still have to pull out $50,000 a year from your investments. So the question becomes, do we start taking Social Security at 62 because the stock market has gone down? And you'll say, well, Drew, the market doesn't, have you been looking at the stock market? It doesn't do that. Well, so look at these drawdowns in the overall market. May of 1970, negative 36. October of 1974, almost 50%. March of 1980, 17%. August 1982, 27% drop. October of 1990, 20%. What if you retired in 81 and you got hit with a 27% decline in 82 and then a 20% decline 8 years later in 1990? How about 2002, 50%, 60% in 2009, March of 2020, negative 34%. So we have to understand that sequence of return risk is a real risk that will affect our overall retirement investment portfolio. And so we come back to, does it make sense to claim Social Security early to elongate our retirement investment? So let's look at this. Let's go back to our strategy. So here we are. We've lost 10% in the market, okay? So now, if we start pulling out that 50,000 because we want to retire at 62, we're taking out 5.5% from our investments. That does not include the 5, 6, 7, 8 years of recovery time it's going to take to get back to that $1 million. Well, what if we start taking Social Security? That's $24,000 a year. So what we do is we turn on Social Security at 62, which is 70% of our full retirement benefit. We need $50,000 in expenses. So we take 50,000, we subtract 24,000, right? And that's $26,000. So now we need $26,000 out of our 900 instead of 50. So 26,000 divided into the 900 is actually 2.8%. So now we're actually below. How far are we below that? 5.5 minus 2.8. That means 2.7% is staying in the portfolio. So 2.7 that we were pulling out here is actually staying in this 900,000. And that's compounding every year to help us to recover back to that million. And remember, compound interest is God's greatest gift outside of Jesus, right? So we want to let compound interest do its job. And so this is a reason that we would want to take Social Security at 62. So 3 reasons to claim Social Security at 62. Number 1, we need immediate income to take care of our retirement expenses. Number 2, there's some longevity risk in our family. We think we're going to die early. Or number 3, the market stumbles, fumbles, and bumbles, and we need to help out our retirement investments and not pull so much out of our distributions. So I hope this video has helped. Listen, if you want a financial EKG, if you want to work with us, go to the description below. We would love to work with you. Have a wonderful day. God bless. Bye-bye.
How much do I need saved for retirement in order to get $5,000 a month in retirement income? That's what we're going to talk about today on the Your Financial EKG YouTube channel. My name is Drew Blackston, and I am a little hoarse today because I am excited to talk to you about retirement. And we're going to look at 3 specific strategies on how much money you need saved for retirement in order to have $5,000 a month in retirement income. You ready? Let's get into it. Now, the first way that you can find out how much money do I need saved for retirement in order to have $5,000 a month in retirement income forever is using the 25X rule. Now, we've talked about the 25X rule a lot on this channel. We've also talked about the limitations of the 25X rule on this channel. But I want to show you why the 25X rule is a good cornerstone for planning for your retirement. Now, let's assume in income, you want $5,000 a month. Now, how do we know how much we need saved in order to generate $5,000 a month? Well, if we use the 25X rule, we take 5,000 and we multiply that by 12. That means we need $60,000 a year, okay, in order to retire and have retirement income. So how much in retirement savings do we need to generate $60,000 a year? Well, that's where the 25X rule comes into play. Take the 60,000, multiply that by 25, and that's going to give you $1,500,000. So what that means is, in order to have $5,000 a month in retirement income, you need at least $1.5 million saved for retirement. Now, let's talk about some of the limitations. Let's assume this person is 60 years old and they want $60,000. Well, at 60, you need $1.5 million. But let's say at 67, they're going to get Social Security of $3,000. So now they're going to get $3,000 a month in Social Security 7 years into their retirement. You multiply that by 12, that's $36,000. So we originally needed $60,000 a year. Now we're going to subtract out 36 because Social Security is coming into play. So we take the 60, that's what we originally needed, subtract out 36, and that gives us, what does that give us? 0, 0, 0, 4, 5, 24,000. Man, you guys catch me doing math, long math on camera. So you take 24,000, you multiply that by 25, and that means it's 600,000. So in reality, what's the right number? Do I need $1.5 million saved for retirement? Or do I need $600,000 saved for retirement? Or do I need somewhere in between those two figures? And so that's sometimes the limitations of just saying, use the 25X rule. The other limitation is twofold. Inflation on this money here and inflation on that, and taxes. How is your money tax qualified? Is it in IRAs, 401ks, 403bs? Because if you need $60,000 to live and all your money's in an IRA, you're going to have to take at least 70 because you got to pay taxes on that money. So the first way we look at this is through the 25X rule. Now we're going to go through step number 2, but step number 3 is where we start to implement the Your Financial EKG software, and we look at all of the different factors, taxes, inflation, market returns, and that's where we get the exact number so we know exactly how much we need saved for retirement to get to $5,000 a month in income. So hang on for that towards the middle end of the video. All right, the next way to determine how much you need saved for retirement in order to have $5,000 a month in retirement income is using the 4% rule. Now, the 4% rule is really simple. It just says take 4% off of whatever you save for retirement plus inflation, and your money's going to last for somewhere around 30 years. But there's some limitations with the 4% rule, and I want to show you that right now. So how you come to know how much you need saved for retirement using the 4% rule is you do a future cash flow calculation. It's a future cash flow calculation, and you can find a calculator on Google. I used my financial calculator for this, but I'm going to show you how we do this. Okay, so if we're doing a future cash flow calculation, we want to know if we want $5,000 a month in retirement income. We want to know how much we need to save to get $5,000 a month in retirement income using the 4% rule. So the first thing is, how long do we want our money to last? Well, that's called your number of periods. We want that to last for 30 years. Now, if you go on Google and you type in future cash flow calculator, you can follow along with me. I'll actually give you the inputs. So in number of periods, it's going to be 30 years. Your I is interest. What's our interest going to be? That's 4%. So you hit I and 4. Now, our present value, that's what we're trying to figure out. How much do we need to have saved right now to get $5,000 a month forever? So we look at the next section of the calculator, and it's called payment. That's how much we're going to get per month. That's $5,000. And then we look at future value as 0, meaning we're going to run this number for the next 30 years down to 0. So what's our present value going to be? So if you do it on the calculator, you get 30 years, 4% interest, $5,000 a month, 0 future value, meaning we've spent all of our money, we've bounced that check on the day that we die. Our present value is $1,047,000. So using the 4% rule, we need $1,047,000 to have $5,000 a month for the rest of our retirement. Now, we're not calculating in inflation. Obviously, you can't do that on a calculator. So there's limitations, just like with the 25X rule. Remember, the 25X rule had us at 1.5 million. Well, somewhere between 1.5 and 600,000. So my question is this, like, which of these numbers is right? Like, I want $5,000 a month. I have Social Security. There's taxes. There's inflation. There's market returns. Like, which one's right? Which one should I do? Hang on. That's what I'm going to show you in the Your Financial EKG software. All right. How much do I need saved in retirement savings in order to get $5,000 a month in retirement income? We're going to go through that in the Your Financial EKG software to give you an exact idea of how much you need saved and all the different variables and factors you have to think about when planning out your retirement income, such as taxes and inflation and market risk and everything that goes into your retirement plan. Are you ready? Let's go through this right now. All right, so we've got David, and we want $5,000 a month in income, and David's retiring at 60 years old. So he's 60, he's retired. How much do we need in retirement savings? Well, we got to look at some other factors first. Now, at 67 years old, David's Social Security is going to be $3,000 a month. Now, obviously, we could take Social Security earlier If we took it at 62, he would get $2,100. And if we took it at 70, he would get an increased benefit of $3,720. Now, if you decide to take Social Security at your full retirement age, you're going to get 100% of your full retirement benefit. If you wait till 70, you get 124% of your full retirement benefit. And if you take it early, 62, 3, 4, 5, or 6, you get a reduced Social Security benefit, 70% at 62. So it's important to have an understanding of when am I going to claim Social Security, especially if we're trying to decide how much retirement income that we want. We got to determine how much we need saved. Well, when are we going to take Social Security? Those are key factors. And so we want to look at that within the software. Now, from an asset standpoint, this is where we're going to determine how much we need saved. So for David, he's got $15,000 in the bank and we have $0 in our 401k. Now, he has more than that in his 401k, but what I'm trying to do is make the software tell me exactly how much he needs by giving it all the other information except for how much he has in retirement savings. Now, David's main asset is his 401k, and it's a traditional 401k, meaning all the money going into his 401k is tax deferred. So when he pulls that money out, it's going to be taxable. So if he needs $5,000 a month to live, that's a net figure. So he needs to take more on top of the $5,000 to pay Uncle Sam. Again, those are things we need to start contemplating. He has a house, it's worth $400,000 and it's debt free. Now, our portfolio weighted average, it's really important to understand how much are our investments projected to earn in retirement. And we're going to look at two different projections. We're going to look at a geometric return, and we're going to look at kind of a Monte Carlo style return and seeing what would this portfolio do if it was put through a meat grinder, right? If the worst case scenario happened, how would this portfolio do? So we're going to assume a 6% rate of interest on his 401k. 6% is pretty conservative compared to the overall market. Think about over the last 50 years, the S&P 500 has averaged 8% with inflation. So 10%, but 8% with inflation. If you put a 6 down there, you're being a little bit more conservative than the overall market. And I know what you're thinking, Drew, what about the market in 2023? What about the market? It's going to crash. I don't know. I can just look back at history and tell you what it's done. And if we look back at history, the market's averaged 8% with inflation, and that's with market crashes. That's with a dot-com bubble. That's with a 1974 crash. That's with a crash in 2008. That's with multiple recessions. That's with presidents assassinated or attempted assassinations. So a lot of crap has happened, and the market has continued to earn 8%. And so I think we can be pretty safe at saying a 6% rate of return. So if we look at an asset track for David, we've got our home of $400,000. We used to make $90,000 a year, but we've retired. Our Social Security is $3,000 a month, no pensions. We have $0 in our 401k, wink, wink, and we've got $15,000 in the bank. So now we know, hey, we gotta know what we gotta save for $5,000 a month. So here's our expenses, $5,000, and we're gonna put a 3% inflation rate on it. Now, inflation history, since 1914, the 109-year average is 3.27. I know that we've put some big numbers on the board the last couple years. 2021, a 7 spot. 2022, a 6.5. Man, I want to score that many runs every baseball game, but we don't want to do that with inflation. But inflation over the long term has averaged about 3.2. So we can assume that over a 20, 30, 40-year retirement, inflation's probably going to revert back to the mean instead of being on an outlier at 7, 8, 9%. All right, cash flows. This is where we would put in anything that David might want to do in the future, like vacations or buying cars, things like that. We don't have any of that right now, so we're just going to leave this alone. Now, taxes are important. This is where we're going to come back to. So we're going to skip this now. We're going to come back to taxes, because I want to show you how your taxes affect how much you need to have saved for retirement income. All right, so now the software is going to tell us exactly how much we need. $1,130,863. That's what we need. So let's say $1,130,900. So let's copy this number. Let's come over here to assets. Let's paste that in. Let's say 900. All right, so we've copied and pasted what the software says we need saved for retirement. Remember, here's our expenses, $5,000 a month. Let's go back to taxes. Remember, I talked to you about just a second ago why that's important. Let's go to the year 2024. That's a full 12 months of taking $60,000 a year. And you can see, look at this, $67,550 is what he needs out of his portfolio. Well, Drew, why is it $7,500 more? Two reasons. One, inflation, and two, taxes. So he has to take out more on top of the 60 to pay Uncle Sam. Here's our standard deduction. So there's our taxable income of $53,852. So his federal tax is $7,155. So that puts him in the 10.57% effective tax rate. He's in the 22% tax bracket, but his effective tax rate after deductions, credits, and all that is 10.5%. Now, let's think about the year 2026, because in the year 2026, the tax code is going to increase. So let's go to 2026, and let's just say it increases by 25%. That's the Obama era tax code. We don't really know what the tax code is going to change to. We know that if Congress does nothing, it reverts back to the Obama era tax code. So in 2026, you can see now he's had to take out $77,403. It's only been 3 years, and we've gone from $60,000 in income to $77,000 with taxes and inflation. And look what his tax bracket is now, 27.5, and it's jumped his projected federal tax rate up to 15.03. So an increase in taxes has caused him to have to take out more for Uncle Sam, but inflation's caused him to take out more for retirement income. So you see how important tax planning is when you're doing your retirement income plan, and why you need a financial EKG to know exactly how much you need saved for retirement with inflations and taxes and market returns. And if you want a financial EKG, all the information's in the description below. So let's take out the increase. Let's reset it back to normal, and let's go to retirement. So here we go. We've got him to 96 years old. So we've pretty much been able to take out $5,000 a month. Here's Social Security, and we never run out of money. We get to basically 96 years old. We got a $577,000 house. It's a really good scenario. Now, let's do a couple tweaks to this plan. Let's go back to Social Security. So remember, at 96 years old is when we run out of spendable assets, not our physical assets, if we take Social Security at 67. But what if we take Social Security early? Like, what if we take it at 62? What does that do? We go back to retirement, and we run out at 96 still. So it didn't do anything. So now we go back to income. Oops, we don't want to add a benefit. We want to go to the calculator. What if we take it at 70? Does that increase, decrease? What's that do? Go to retirement? Look, we actually lost a year. So for David, it makes the most sense for him to take Social Security between ages 62 and 67. What if we take it at Medicare age at 65? I have a lot of clients that like to take it at Medicare age because they are able to get off of the Affordable Health Care Act. They go on to Medicare. Now we don't have to worry about subsidies and where our income is coming from. It's really important if you retire under the age of 65 to keep in mind that if you're going to get health insurance on the Affordable Health Care Act or on the exchange, that you need to keep your income below a certain level if you want a subsidy. Because if your income goes above a certain level, you're going to pay for all your health insurance, or you're going to have a big tax bill at the end of the year. And a lot of people don't think about that. So if we take Social Security at 65, we're still out at 96. So let's just leave it there. We'll take Social Security at 65. And you can see that our rate of return that we need to avoid a shortfall is only 6.41%, which means that the assets in the market only need to earn 6.4 to make David's money last till past 100, which are we really worried about that? He's running out at 96. But you can see we're running this at 6%, which is pretty good. So he's in a really good place. We only need 0.4% more basically on his 401k, and we never run out of money. It's a really good situation. Now let's look at the market for a second. So this is our Monte Carlo scenario. And what I love about the software is it's going to break down the Monte Carlos on an individual basis. Instead of it being a big chart, you know, you've seen those people on YouTube, they stand behind a board and they've got this big chart of Monte Carlos and there's all these little lines and they're like, well, you know, in this scenario, it's like got an 85% probability. In this scenario, it's a 96. In this scenario, it's a 60%. I'm like, dude, I want to know like 100% like when I fly from Tampa to Vegas, like I don't want an 80% probability we're going to get there. I want 100% probability or 99.99. And it should be the same with your retirement. Why are we going to base our retirement on probability? We need to base our retirement on getting to retirement, getting through retirement, and protecting our ability to stay in retirement. Don't probability me. All right, so here we go. I'll get off my high horse for a second. I'll make my voice even more hoarse doing that. So we're going to show Monte Carlo, and what we're going to do with these randomized rates of return is we're going to have some really crappy returns up front, and then we're going to have random returns all the way out through his retirement. So what does this do for David? Let's see. Well, look at this. He's out at 81. Wow, that's a big deal, right? That's not 96. Well, we're calculating. That's 81. Well, what caused that to happen? This right here, negative 14, negative 12, negative 12, negative 11. That's called sequence of return risk. Sequence of return risk is the risk that you go into retirement and the market immediately falls. And that for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, the market is down, it's negative, and you're pulling money out of a negative asset. And the only way for that asset to go back up is the market has to go up. But the problem is you're pulling money out of it. And that's called sequence of return risk. It's like running uphill in sand. It's really difficult to get to the top. And so we've got to look at David's strategy and say, okay, Dave, if we have a really bad 4 years in a row, now the last time the market went down 4 straight years was during the Great Depression. But if this happens, we need to be aware of that. We might need to adjust your spending or your retirement income. So let's generate some new rates of return. Okay, -1, -7, -7 to start out his retirement. What does it look like here? Oh, 94 and 96. We're looking better. So you see how we can randomize this and actually get into the Monte Carlos themselves. This one's going to be really bad. Look, 16, 12, 3, and 16. Let's go down here. Yeah, we're out at 78. Now, the other thing that we can look at other than randomized rates of return is we can go to historical rates. So Dave, what happens if you retire and the year 2000 happened and it mirrored what happened between 2000 and 2010? Where's your portfolio? Oh my gosh, Dave, you're out of money at 77. So if we have a tech bubble crisis, you're out at 77 years old. That's tough. What if we have a 2008? Where are you at now? Look at this. You never run out of money. That's pretty good. Let's go back to 1964. Because, well, let's use 1968. So from 1968 to 1982, that's the last time we had high inflation. So let's look at what happened then. Oh man, you're out at 81. So when we start throwing in market volatility into this portfolio, what we're noticing is this $1.1 million that the software is saying you need is not actually holding up. Because what we're doing is instead of taking geometric rates of return, just 4, 4, 4, or 5, 5, 5, or 6, 6, 6, or whatever, now we're actually taking market returns, historical market returns and randomized market returns, and we're putting them in here. So for Dave, this might be a situation where we have a serious conversation. I say, hey, David, do you need this amount of money every month? Can you lower your expenses? Or, I know I say this and you don't like it, can you work part-time? Now, it doesn't have to be the rest of your retirement. And it could be at Home Depot for 5 years, 10 years, whatever you want to do. But can we have some added income into the portfolio? So there's always situations where the world's not perfect and we can't always find a perfect situation. But what we can do is find solutions so that you can get to retirement, you can get through retirement, and you can protect yourself from getting out of retirement. Hey, thank you so much for watching and putting up with my voice. God bless. Bye-bye. We have a $1 million retirement investment portfolio. How much retirement income can we generate from our $1 million? That's what we're going to look at today on the Your Financial EKG YouTube channel. And it doesn't have to be $1 million saved for retirement. It could be $100,000 saved for retirement. And you can use these rules to understand how much retirement income you can generate from your retirement investing accounts. Now, the question becomes, how much can I safely spend each year without running out of money? That's why we do our Your Financial EKG. We want to show clients, how can I not run out of retirement income or retirement investments? Now, let's use a $1 million retirement investment portfolio as an example. You might have $1 million saved in your 401k, your traditional IRA, your Roth IRA, a 403b, and honestly, a combination of all of that is what makes up your retirement investing account. So most advisors will talk about the 4% rule. Let's understand how that rule actually works. Now, towards the end of this video, we're going to go through an exact financial EKG to show you how much you can spend on a $1 million portfolio. So hang on to the end, but let's go through some of these rules. Simply put, the 4% rule says you can take 4% off of your retirement investments with inflation, and that should last around 30 years. So let's use $1 million as an example. We've got $1 million saved for retirement. We take 4% off of that. That's $40,000 a year. Now, every year, you can take 4% off the ending balance of your retirement investing accounts, plus adding in inflation. So if inflation's 3%, you want to add an extra 3% onto the 40,000, not the million, or you're going to add an extra $30,000 onto your distribution. But the question becomes, is the 4% rule the right rule for you? I talk a lot about this in my book, Can I Really Retire? And you can get that on Amazon. Go to the link below. But what happens if you retire in a down stock market? What if the market's down 10, 15, 20%? Is the 4% rule the right rule for you? And does the 4% rule calculate in Social Security, pensions, that trip that you want to take to Athens, Greece next year that's going to cost $30,000? How about inflation over and above nominal inflation, a CPI, some of the inflation that they don't calculate, like healthcare or food and gas? That's not put into the CPI index because apparently the Federal Reserve is a bunch of zombies. How does the 4% rule actually work? Some data says the 4% rule should be updated to the 2.8% rule. Does that actually factor in? So let's look at 4 factors that impact your retirement spending, and then we're going to go through the exact scenario of a retirement EKG, $1 million saved for retirement. How much can they safely spend? Now, factor number 1 that affects your retirement is taxes. Taxes, taxes, taxes. Taxes are going to be the biggest cost that you're going to face in retirement. Why is that? Most individuals have their retirement savings in pre-tax investment accounts. What do I mean by that? 401ks, IRAs, SEPs, Simples. Many of these accounts are what the majority of Americans save their retirement investments in. And those investments, for the most part, are pre-tax, meaning when you take out $1 from your 401k or $1 from your IRA, you're going to pay taxes on 100 pennies, right? All that dollar is considered ordinary income, and all of that dollar is calculated for your taxes. So taxes in retirement are going to be some of the biggest expenses that you are going to face, and having a tax plan. How do I convert this money from pre-tax to post-tax? Am I saving in the right investment accounts? Should I be saving in a Roth 401k instead of a 401k? Should I be making a Roth IRA contribution instead of a traditional IRA contribution? What about a backdoor Roth IRA contribution? Should I be looking at that? That is one of the major factors when it comes to your retirement. Understanding that will help explain how much you can safely spend in retirement. Let me give you another good example. Let's use the 4% rule again. You've got $1 million in a pre-tax 401k. You withdraw $40,000 off of your pre-tax 401k. Now, in order to net $40,000 using a 20% federal tax code, you've got to take out another $8,000 on top of the 40. So really, you're taking out $48,000 to net $40,000. But all $48,000 are considered taxable income. But if you've got $1 million in a Roth 401k, which would be the dream, right? If you take out $40,000 from your Roth 401k, then all $40,000 is tax-free. Now, I understand that many of you did not even have access to a Roth 401k or a Roth IRA until later in your working career. And that's why it's so important to understand, what should I be doing now to become more tax efficient? The second factor that you want to consider if you're thinking, how much can I spend on my retirement investments, is inflation. Having a solid plan for your inflationary expenses is going to help you determine how much can I spend each month, each year, each decade. Keep in mind, you have inflationary expenses that go up every month. Think about buying a Coca-Cola or a pop, depending on what part of the country you're in. Put in the comment section, do you call it a Coke? Do you call it a pop? Do you call it a soda? Where I'm from, okay, I'm from Kentucky, the bluegrass state. When I go to a restaurant and I ask for a Coke, if they have Pepsi, I mean the same thing. It's a Coke. Bring me a Coke. Now, I am not a Pepsi guy, though. I am a Coca-Cola guy. But inflationary expenses like Coke go up every year, normally with inflation, which we like to project out at 3%. But what about your mortgage payment or your auto loan payment? Those are payments that will not go up with inflation. Now, you might be saying, Drew, you don't understand. My mortgage payment goes up every year. That is correct, because you have taxes and insurance escrowed inside of your mortgage payment. Mortgage payments have an annuitization schedule. Your mortgage payment is your principal and interest. How much of your payment is going to principal and interest? That's why we pull out the taxes and the insurance and leave in the principal and interest when we're doing a financial EKG. So the taxes and the insurance go in a separate line item, give it inflation of 3%. We leave the principal and interest as a separate line item with 0% inflation. And what we're trying to do for a client is get a individualized inflation rate so that they can go, hey, my expenses are not all at 3%. I'm actually at 2.9 or 2.5. Because if we take all of your expenses, give it a 3% inflation rate and say, forget about it, then that compounding interest on that inflation is going to kill your retirement investments. Now, I always say compound interest is God's greatest gift outside of Jesus. And it does work on inflation just like it works in your 401k. And so that's why we got to have a plan for it. The third factor that could affect your retirement spending plan, especially as you get later into retirement, is longevity. Now, obviously, we don't know how long you're going to live. You could walk outside today, be struck by lightning, hit by a bus, or mauled by a bear, depending on where you live. But you might have longevity in your family. Great grandma might have lived to 98. Grandma might have lived to 96. Your mom might have smoked cigarettes and cooked with lard and lived to 95 years old. So you know that, God forbid me getting hit by a bus, I'm probably going to live into my 90s. So understanding longevity in your family is going to allow you to understand how much can I spend now versus what am I going to need saved later in life. The only person who knows how long you're going to be on this planet is the Lord God above. Now, He's not letting me know when I'm leaving, and I'm sure He's not letting you know when you're leaving. So it's important to understand how much money can I spend now projected out based on how long I'm going to live. On the opposite side of things, I just got off a phone call with a client. He had leukemia 17 years ago. He still takes medication for leukemia to keep it away. His life expectancy is below 80 years old. He could go in the next 10 years. So he understands that he can spend more money now, knowing that he's not probably going to live into his late 90s just because of his health. Now, the fourth factor that you need to think about when you're considering how much money can I safely spend off of my retirement portfolio is investment returns. What are your stock market investments returning? How do you have your stock market investments allocated? I call this the guardrail rule. If you're driving down I-65 in Kentucky, let's say you're going from Bowling Green to Louisville, and the speed limit is 70 miles an hour. If you go 90 miles an hour and the Kentucky State Patrolman sees you and he hits you with his radar gun, he gonna pull you over, you're gonna get a ticket, and you're gonna pay the Treasury Department at the state of Kentucky, or whoever the money goes to, you're gonna pay them some money for going over the speed limit. On the reverse side of things, if you're on I-65 and you're going 50 miles an hour, and it's a 70 mile an hour zone, that same Kentucky State Patrolman's probably gonna pull you over. He might not give you a ticket, but he's gonna say, hey, roll down your window. Can you explain to me why in the world you're going 50 miles an hour on I-65 and everybody is blowing by you? You are causing some major trouble. That's the same with our investments. We call it the guardrail rule. We want to understand how fast do my investments need to go to get me from point A to point B. And you want to understand that too. What rate of return do I need to earn on my investments in order to make my money last forever? When we're doing a financial EKG for clients, we say, okay, your investments are currently making or averaging 8%, whatever the number might be. And your risk allocation, meaning how risky you are, is a 70%. Meaning that you're pretty aggressive and you're averaging 8%, which is you're being compensated for the risk. But according to the EKG, according to the comprehensive financial plan, you actually only need to earn about 4% a year to make this money last forever. And your risk allocation only needs to be about 40%. I'm not telling you to give up growth, but what I'm saying is as you step into retirement, do you want to still be trying to hit home runs? Or will singles and doubles get you on base and get you to, through, and protect your ability to stay in retirement? And that's why you want to understand what are my investment returns going to be as I get into retirement. Just like longevity, we don't know how the markets are going to return, but we can set ourselves up, we can allocate ourselves for what we predict are going to be market returns based on historical probabilities. All right, now, let's get into a detailed financial EKG. I've got $1 million in my retirement investment portfolio. How much can I spend? All right, I've got $1 million in my retirement investing accounts. How much can I safely spend? Let's look at the financial EKG right now. All right, so I've got Johnny Rocket. Any of y'all remember Johnny Rocket cartoon? Love that guy. He's got some good hair. Hopefully I got some hair like him. We've got $1 million retirement portfolio, and here's what we're looking at. So this is an actual client. I changed the name to protect the innocent, but Johnny's works for Granger. He makes $120,000 a year, and he's looking at retiring at 65. Now, he does get a projected increase on his salary of about 1% a year. Sometimes it could be higher than that. Sometimes it could be lower, but we're going to project out just that 1% at this point. Now, what we're looking at with the financial EKG is if we retire today, He asked me, can I retire today? And if he retires today, he's going to have right about $1 million, a little bit more in his retirement assets. Now, if he can't retire today, we'll have more than $1 million, but the solutions still work to see how much can we spend, okay? Now, from a Social Security standpoint, if he claims at 67, he would get $3,100 a month in benefits. Now, keep in mind, from a Social Security standpoint, if you were born in the year 1960 or after, and you claim Social Security at 62, you're going to get 70% of your full retirement benefit. Now, if you claim anywhere between ages 62 and 67, you get an increased benefit up to age 67, which you get 100% of your full retirement benefit. Now, from 67 to 70, you get an 8% growth up to 124% of your benefit at 70. I call these people broccoli eaters, overachievers. Who actually likes to eat broccoli? So, depending on when you claim Social Security, age depends on the amount of money that you get in your Social Security check. So for Johnny, we're looking at claiming at 67. And you can see if we go to the calculator here, if we claim at 62, you'd get $2,170. If we claimed at 63, $2,325. If we claimed at 68, 69, or 70, we get an increased benefit. So that's something we want to always be looking at is how do we get the best or the most optimal Social Security for our financial plan. It's not about what Forbes tells you. It's not about what Dave Ramsey says, even though I like Dave. It's not about what, just name any financial expert. Susie Orman says it's about what fits you, especially if you're married and especially if you're single. You see, it doesn't matter. Married or single, the optimal Social Security strategy is based on you. Okay? From an asset standpoint, Johnny's got a traditional IRA of $500,000. He had some older jobs. These were older 401ks that were rolled into a traditional IRA. He's got about $500,000 in his traditional IRA. In a Roth IRA, he has about $250,000. So we've got some tax-free money there. In his current 401k, he has $300,000, of which he is making contributions, but we are looking at this as he is retired. So no contributions at this point because he is retired. And in the bank, he's got about $25,000. So we've got $1,075,000 saved for retirement. Now, here's what I want you to notice. We've got 3 different investment buckets plus a 4th cash bucket. Do you understand the taxes on all 4 of these buckets? Keep in mind, there's a different, each bucket is taxed differently. This is an IRA and this is a 401k. These are both pre-tax, meaning on this $300,000 and on this $500,000 for Johnny, which is what, $800K, there has not been any taxes paid on this money. So every cent, every dollar that comes out of Johnny's IRA or Johnny's 401k is going to go towards his ordinary tax. He's going to pay taxes on that money. Now, he also has a Roth IRA. And all of that Roth IRA is beautiful. It is tax-free. Now, Johnny got $250,000 in his Roth IRA because he began contributing to his Roth IRA when he was allowed to, and he continued to contribute it. He continued to invest. If you want to grow your investments, it's really simple. Contribute, invest, rinse, and repeat. If you have a 401k, a 403b, a Roth 401k, an IRA, a Roth IRA, a SEP, a simple, if you have something, your money's not going to grow unless you contribute and invest. And if you have a 401k at work and your company offers you a match, if they offer you free money, please put in enough to get the match. So if your company offers a 3% match, put in 3%, get the free money, that's 6%. If you're saving for retirement, a really good rule of thumb is you want to save 10 to 15% of your gross income for retirement. So if you make $100,000 a year, you want to save somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000 a year for retirement. And if you're going to get 3% of that 10 or 15% from a company match for free, do that. That's free money. And then start to do it to a point where you contribute and invest and you forget about the match. You're putting in 10 and 15% of your own money. You're getting the match on top of that. And that is like gravy on your mashed potatoes, or taters as we like to call them, at Thanksgiving. So Johnny's got 4 different buckets of retirement investments and 4 different types of taxes. Down here, this is what we call non-qualified money that's in his bank, dividends, interest. That's what you find taxed on this money. So all 4 of these accounts are taxed differently. So it's really important if you understand how taxes work, because that will determine how much money you can spend in retirement. Now, from the standpoint of his protected asset, he does have a home worth $650,000. And we're looking at a rate of return for his money at right about 4%. We're going to be really conservative on our rate of return. Listen, 6, 7, 8 is what we're shooting for when we're managing his assets. But we're going to project out 4. We're going to come in lower, and we're going to hope that it comes in higher. But if it comes in at 4%, if the market doesn't perform, then hey, we've projected out at a low rate of return. Now, his house, we're not looking at a 5% rate of return on that. We're going to look at 1% on the home. So now we put all that together, and we have an annualized rate of return of about 3.93%. Now let's talk about expenses, because this is where the rubber meets the road. How much do I need to spend, and then how much can I safely spend? Because those are 2 different things, right? What you need to spend is your survival. Like, how much does it cost for your medication? How much does it cost to go to the grocery store? How much is your streaming bill? How much is your electricity bill? How much is your taxes and your insurance? What does all that cost? And then how much do you want to spend on top of that? Those are 2 very different numbers. So for him, we've got IRMA built into here. We have a mortgage of $1,250. Here's that 0% inflation on mortgage. And that mortgage will end in the year 2031. He's got baseline expenses of $3,000, baseline meaning survival, okay? We have our homeowner's insurance and taxes of about $1,000 a month, so $12,000 a year, and we have inflation on that number, okay? And that goes in perpetuity as well as his baseline. We have healthcare costs, okay? This is pre and post Medicare, of $800 in perpetuity. And we have travel and fun of about $10,000 a year until 2040. So altogether, we're looking at about $6,883 per month in expenses, with an average inflation rate of 2.67%. That's why it's really important to find out your individualized inflation rate. What is that? What's it going to be? It's not 3%, right? Because his mortgage doesn't have inflation. And one of the other things that I look at for clients, and this is probably skipping ahead too much, but since we're friends, I'll stop right here and we'll kind of look at this. You see this right here, this travel fund, $10,000 a year. Okay, we have at $833 a month. We line itemize it. We put inflation on that, meaning for the next 16 years, he wants to spend $10,000 on travel with inflation, because plane tickets today are, not what plane tickets are going to cost a couple years from now. But if the plan doesn't work, if he's running out of money, but he still wants to retire today, one of the things that we can do is we can say, well, what are some of these expenses that you can control? And what are some of these expenses that you can't control? Like, you can't control your survival expenses, right? Like, you still have, you need your prescription meds. You need to go to the grocery store. Maybe you go to Aldi instead of Whole Foods. You can't control your light bill unless you live in the dark. You can cut your streaming services or whatever, but your survival is your survival, and it's going to have inflation on it. Your homeowner's insurance and taxes, only so much you can do on that. Listen, I lived in Florida for 20 years. Homeowner's insurance went boop, 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 boop. Taxes went boop, 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 boop. I couldn't control any of it, right? I tried to vote, but ain't nobody listening to me. Healthcare, you got to have health insurance, right? You got to take care of your body. But this travel and fun is something that you can control. So what we can do is, instead of having inflation on it, we can drop the inflation down to 2%. We can put the inflation at 1%, or we can put the inflation at 0%, meaning maybe he spends his travel and he goes to Washington, D.C. and he tours all the Smithsonians, and that cost him, $10,000. Whatever. He stays at, some bougie hotel. But then 10 years from now, that $10,000 has no inflation. So instead of going to somewhere bougie, he's going to hike the Appalachian Trail and he stays at a Holiday Inn Express. Nothing wrong with that. I would prefer going on the Appalachian Trail and spending time out in the woods. One of my favorite books is My Side of the Mountain. I love being out in the woods. But it's something that you can control. You see that? I'm trying to make that funny, but that's something that you can control there. So let's leave the inflation on it for now, and then we'll come back and we'll look at it. Okay. Cash flows. No cash flows at this point. Cash flows are going to be if we're going to buy a home, if we're going to put a new roof on, if we're going to leave money to our kids and we want to start gifting them money now. That's where our cash flows come in. We also have an income statement we can look at. What we're looking at here is, here's our expenses, $6,883. So we do this by month, May, June, July, August, September. We're looking at the next 12 months. He's got $6,000 in expenses. You see how that goes up with inflation, 6,898, 6,913. His net cash flow, which means what he has to pull off of his investments, net. Let me show you that word again. Net cash flow. Remember, we just talked about that. Taxes. He has $800,000 of taxable money. So taxes, you have gross, right? You have gross distribution and you have net distribution. Gross distribution means how much you pull out of your IRA. Net means how much goes into your bank account after Uncle Sam, and then after state taxes. If you have that in your state, you always want to understand what states tax what Social Security. Washington and Pennsylvania are really nice to Social Security and IRA distributions. Kentucky might tax a distribution on an IRA. So you want to understand your specific state. Florida, Texas, no state income tax. Tennessee, no state income tax. So we've got net. These are gross. These are his expenses, right? We've got to take out a net value to get to those expenses. Now, percentage of expenses paid from an income source, meaning Social Security, pension, real estate, something like that, is 0. So all of these expenses are coming from his retirement investments, okay? Well, we'll skip taxes for now. We'll go straight to retirement. So from a retirement standpoint, we can already see, look, he's running out of money at 83. So what's going on? Let's look at this. Okay, first thing we see here is we're waiting 5 years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, to claim Social Security. So he's retiring at 62. We're waiting till 67 to claim Social Security. Does that make sense? Because we start at $1,047,000. By age 67, we're down to $741,000. So let's just pull out the old calculator. 1,047,175, subtract out 741, 746. That's $305,000 that we're using to live on. Remember, we're projecting out a 4% annualized rate. We also have net monthly expenses. You see that net mean taxes are coming out of this. So let's go to like year 2025. Actually, let's do this. Let's update this projection because we're in 2025 now. We started this back in 2024. All right, 87. So it did change a little bit there. But let's look at 2027 here. Okay, so you see we have no pensions, no Social Security, monthly and annual cash flows are 0. This is our expenses. This is what we're having to pull out of our portfolio, okay? So all of that's coming out. Now here's our taxes on that. Here's our federal gross income, $100,000 in taxable withdrawals. There's our deduction, so there's our taxable income. We have a progressive tax code. So he's in the 13.24% federal tax rate, but 22% overall tax bracket, okay? So for Johnny, we've got to look at taxes as well. Now in his situation, when we updated the plan for the age we're at now, we're running out of money at 87, which is, I think that's pretty good. 87, I mean, odds are he won't be here at 87, but I don't want to play that game. Let's try to push this into our 90s. So what can we do? We have a shortfall of $418,000 unless Johnny wins the lottery or he goes to a casino or whatever. We don't have $418,000 unless he has a great uncle that dies and leaves him all the money he doesn't know about, right? Our rate of return is 6.31%. So that's our annualized rates of return that we need to earn in order for this money to never run out. We're projecting out 4, the software says 6. Well, outside of Johnny going back to work, right? The easiest thing would be to say, hey, Johnny, work until age 64. Now what does it do? Pushes it to 89, okay? What about if we work until Medicare age? We kick it on at 65. Now we're in 93. Okay, Johnny, work another 2 years. You can run out at 93. And if I stop the video there, you know how many of y'all be screaming at me in the comment section? So Johnny wants to retire now. So what can he do? Well, the first thing he can do is decide to claim Social Security at a little earlier age. Remember, we're losing a good amount of money right here because we're not claiming Social Security. So it's coming from over here in our retirement investment accounts. So what if we decide to claim Social Security earlier? So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the software. We're going to see what's the optimal time for Johnny to claim Social Security based on the software. We said 67. It's saying 65. Okay. So if we do it at 65, look at that. It doesn't really push him an extra year. So what I want to do now is go back to income. I want to change this. He's retiring at 63. Let's change this to age 63. Okay, so we're going to change it to 63. Let's go back to retirement. Let's see what it does. Okay, we're still running out of money at 87, but what we don't have is that massive drawdown early in his retirement. You see that? Now, we start to lose our funds later in retirement. See this like 77, 78, 79? We really start to draw down our assets. So now he still wants to retire. What can we do? Well, first of all, let's take all this yellow off because it's really distracting to me. I'm ADHD squirrel. You want to talk about baseball? Oh, no. Let's stay in the retirement plan. Okay, let's go to expenses. Who's your favorite ball team, by the way? Baseball team? I'm a Cubs and Rays guy. I grew up Harry Carey, Steve Stone, Sammy Sosa, Mark Grace. Those are my dudes, right? Back in the day. Rays fan in Tampa, love Kevin Cash. Who do you like? Leave it in the comment section. Okay, so we got a mortgage. Can't change that, right? We could sell our house, maybe downsize, but let's say you don't want to do that. Survival expenses? Can't change that. Homeowners insurance taxes? Can't change that. Healthcare? Can we change healthcare? Could we get a subsidy to lower our healthcare cost? We could, but let's leave healthcare where it's at. Let's go to travel and fun. What if we take travel and fun down to 2% inflation? So instead of looking at this at 3% inflation, what if we change his travel budget to a 2% inflation? What does that do? Let's go to retirement. Changes it a little bit, but not enough. Let's go back. What if we change travel to 1%? What I want to try to do is give him the $10,000 up front, right? Because your retirement is like a reverse smile. You start here, you spend a lot of money. As time goes on, it goes down, and then it comes back up for healthcare costs. That's why we have the house. But what if we take it to 1%? So he spends that $10,000 up front, and then it just gradually goes down over time. Look at that. That pushes him an extra year. Go to expenses. Let's change this to 0. So 0 inflation, meaning you're going to use $10,000 no matter what it costs every year. So it's $10,000, $10,000, $10,000, no inflation. We go back to retirement. Still stays at 88 years old. Now, the other question we can come for Johnny is we can say, hey, Johnny, this has got us for the next 15 years, okay? You are currently 63 years old. 15 years of travel would put you at 78. Do you think you'll be traveling at 78 like you are at 65? And he might say, no, I'm not. So let's jump this down to 10 years. So we'll say 2035, okay? Let's go back to retirement. Look at that. It pushes him another year. Okay, so Johnny, do you want to retire right now? Yes, I do. Can you change your travel budget to a 0% inflation in only 10 years instead of 3% inflation in 15 years? Yes, I will. Boom. Now we can retire at 60 years old. Our rate of return that we need to earn our investments is 5.95%. And based on our expenses, claiming Social Security and taxes, here we are. Now, the other question is, let's go to taxes. So we skipped over taxes just a second ago. Let's go back to taxes. Here's the thing. He's got $800,000 in IRA money. The question would become, can we move some of this IRA money to Roth IRA money? And by doing that, can we elongate his retirement plan by paying a little bit more taxes now, but less taxes, later in life? Well, that would be the next question. So let's look at that. What happens if we throw some Roth conversions in here? Let's look at a 7-year schedule of Roth conversions. And let's see what happens. Let's see if the software says it even makes sense. Okay, so it allows us to do it. Sometimes the software will say, hey, it doesn't make sense to do that. And we have to manually go in and look at doing some Roth conversions. Because again, the software is great. I still want to use our brains. I like AI, but I still want to be creative. Okay, so now what we've done is we've added the Roth conversions in. So here we go. Here's adding in some Roth conversions. We're strictly doing it out of his 401k. We go to retirement. What does that do? Still has us at 89. Now, here's what I want you to notice. Let's go back to retirement. Perfect. Okay, good. Now, let's go to age 80. At age 80, look how much he has in his Roth conversion account, $175,000. We've got $544,000 at 80 in spendable assets. So let's highlight that, 544. Let's go over here. Let's go to 80. We've got 588. Okay, so actually not doing Roth conversions made a lot of sense for Johnny at this point by about $40,000. Now the question becomes, how much of this is taxable? Well, $464,000, 588. So basically $464,000 is fully taxable at 80 years old. Over here, how much is fully taxable? $329,000 is fully taxable. That might make sense to do the Roth conversions. And then we're out of money at 89, okay, in this scenario, and we're out of money at 89 here. So running out of money doing Roth conversions doesn't really change his scenario because of his spending. Now, here's the thing. Let's go back to Roth conversions. What if, Johnny, I know you might not like this, but what if we work just one more year? Can we get you into your 90s? So let's go to expenses. Our healthcare, we're not going to need that for one more year. Okay, because we're going to get company healthcare. What does that do to our retirement now? Gets us into our 90s, right at 90. Feel pretty good about that. Plus we have this house. Look at this house. $793,000, $800,000. That's only growing at 1%. What if at 80 he decides to sell that and to move into a rental? I know it's tough. I've got an uncle right now in his late 70s. He had a stroke. He's got to move. He don't want to move. He's got to move. It's tough at that age. But he's going to be able to take that equity, move into a smaller house, a better house for where he's at from a healthcare standpoint. He's going to be able to use the equity that he doesn't spend on his retirement income. So what we're trying to look at here is not just, yes, you can spend $10,000 a month and it's all going to work out. You got to factor in everything, especially when it comes to your retirement, because here's the thing. Your retirement is one and done, right? I'm a Kentucky basketball fan. One and done. That's what they called us for a long time under Calipari. Now he's at Arkansas. God bless you, Razorbacks, for taking him. One and done. We don't want to go back into retirement. There are statistics right now saying that more retirees than ever are going back to work. Do you want to be one of them? No, you don't. But you want to retire once. And if you want a financial EKG, go to the description below. We would love to meet with you and help you on your retirement journey. Thank you so much for watching. God bless. Bye-bye. How much can I expect to spend in retirement with a $4.5 million retirement investment portfolio? That's what we're going to look at today on the Your Financial EKG YouTube channel. And I want to look at 2 rules of thumb, and then I want to go into a deep dive into the Financial EKG software to show you how much you can expect to spend. So let's look at this. We've got $4.5 million in retirement assets. The first rule of thumb that most people will use when trying to plan out their retirement income is the 4% rule. And the 4% rule is really simple. It just says that you take 4% of your retirement investing accounts each year. You do that plus inflation, and your money should last about 30 years in a normal market cycle. So for this, if we take $4.5 million, we multiply that
by 4%, this is going to give us $180,000 a year in retirement income. Now, you might be thinking, Drew, that's great. I want $180,000 in retirement income. And that's very true. But you also have to consider, with the 4% rule, what kind of money is this? What bucket did this money come from? What if all this money is 401k? If all this money is 401k, then all of this 180,000 right here is taxable. So if all of this is taxable and you live in, let's say, the state of New York, where this couple lives, which we're going to look at, they're going to be in the 22% federal tax bracket. They're also going to be in a 9% state tax, state and local, because they're in the Staten Island area. And so you've got to understand, if I'm pulling money out of my retirement investing accounts, what's that look like from a tax standpoint, not just a gross number, how much can I get? Because if you take 22, right, and you add 9 into it, that's 31%, $180,000. Take 31% of that for taxes. Now, I understand we have a progressive tax code, and we're going to get into that in the details, and I'm going to show you the progression of that. But just in holistic numbers, that's a lot of taxes that we've got to be prepared for. So understanding taxes and withdrawal buckets is just as important in understanding the number of how much I'm going to receive in retirement income. Now, the second rule of thumb that you can use to plan out your retirement income is the 80% rule. Now, let me show you what the 80% rule says. So let's use Jill. So we've got Jill as our client today. She lives in New York. She's married. She's the only one working. Her husband retired a couple years ago. And Jill has made $228,000, okay, for the last few years. What the 80% rule says is take 80% of that $228,000, and that's how much you're going to need in retirement income once you retire. So let's pull out the handy calculator. $228,000, multiply that by 80%, that is $182,000. So the 80% rule says that we're going to need at least $182,000 for our retirement income. Now, remember what the 4% rule said. The 4% rule on their $4.5 million said they're going to need $180,000. So these two rules actually work together in helping you plan out your retirement income. Keep in mind, with the 80% rule as well as the 4% rule, we have to understand taxes, and we have to understand inflation. And we're going to get into that in just a second in the details of all this, because taxes and inflation can erode your retirement income faster than anything else in your retirement, maybe outside of healthcare if you have a chronic condition, because healthcare inflation is running at about 7%, whereas national inflation is running about 3.26 according to the Federal Reserve. Now, they don't count food, they don't count energy, and they can add and subtract things from their basket of goods anytime they want. So I'm pretty sure that's a manipulated number, but we're going to go with it because that's what we've got to work with. So how much can you spend in retirement income with $4.5 million? Let's get into an exact scenario of that right now. All right, I got a $4.5 million retirement investment portfolio. How much can I expect to spend in retirement? Let's do a deep dive into the software to show you the tools that will help you plan your retirement. Okay, so here's what we've got. We've got Jill and we've got Randy Turnover. That's their name. Now, that's not their real name. We've changed the names to protect the innocent. Here are their assets. We've got a Fidelity brokerage account of $550,000. We have another brokerage account of $27,000. We have an inherited IRA for Jill for $18,000. We have a stock account for Jill of $45,000. We have Jill's 401k that's worth $1.2 million. We've got Jill's old 401k from a previous job That's $846,000. We have Randy's old 401k. Remember, Randy is retired, of 1.789. We have an I bond of 11,000, and we've got about 30,000 sitting in the bank. Now, the reason I wanted to go through each individual account is because the taxability of each individual account is different, and the withdrawal order of your retirement income from those individual accounts is super duper important. So let me show you what I mean by that. So we have a joint account with Fidelity. There's $550,000 in that. Now, we're going to get into cost basis and dividends here in just a second. But for Jill and Randy, if they pull money out of this $550,000, they're going to pay taxes on dividends, capital gains, and interest, and they're going to get to write off capital losses. We call this a freedom fund here at Pearl Wealth Group. What the freedom fund allows us to do is the freedom to retire, or the freedom to make tax strategy planning, or the freedom and the flexibility to adjust our retirement income in any way we want. So for Jill and Randy, they're going to retire now. And so we're going to use their Fidelity account, this $550,000, this $27,000 brokerage account. Both are freedom funds. We're going to use this inherited IRA account for Jill and her stock account as the first bucket of retirement income. We're going to do that because they're not going to pay ordinary income tax on that money except for the inherited IRA. So we're going to use that money, and what we're going to be able to do is do tax planning on all of that 401k money that's on the backside. Keep in mind, for Jill, we've got this $1.2 million, we have this $846,000, and for Randy, we have this $1.789. All of that money is pre-tax. And they live in the state of New York. And New York's like, let's go, give me that money. And Uncle Sam's like, let's go, give me that money. Right now, there's $45 trillion sitting in retirement accounts. The U.S. government knows that, and they want your tax dollars. So what we need to do is we need to use these buckets for retirement income, and we need to use these buckets for Roth conversions to try to push those taxes into these low brackets that we have now and push them later down the road into the Roth accounts so that we're pulling the money out tax-free. So the ability to have some maneuverability in this is why we want those freedom funds. Okay, so let's go back to the front and let's kind of give some basic information for Jill and Randy and see how we got where we're at today. Now, I love what Proverbs 24:27 says. It says this: do your planning and prepare your fields before building your house. Jill and Randy came to me before they were fully retired. And so we did the preparing, the planning, the prepping of their field before they built their house. They built their retirement house. We call that a ROC strategy, retire on confident knowledge. And so that's what we're going to look at today for them. Now, Jill is working. She makes $228,000 a year, and we're retiring in July. As of recording of this video, it's the last day of June, so Jill is retiring in the next month. She also gets a bonus of about $57,000 a year. Again, July is when all that is ending. Now, from a Social Security standpoint for Jill and Randy, if they claim at 67, Jill's going to get $30,624 in full retirement. Randy would get $26,919. Now, keep in mind, if you claim Social Security at 67, if you were born in the year 1960 or after, you will get 100% of your full retirement benefit. But if you claim earlier, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, you're going to get a reduced benefit. At 62, it's 70% of your full retirement benefit. Now, if you wait until 68, 69, or 70, you'll get an increased benefit. I call these people overachievers, broccoli eaters, and you're going to get 124% of your full retirement benefit if you wait until 70. So let me show you what that looks like for Jill and Randy. So for Jill, if we were to claim at 62, she would get $25.37 in Social Security benefit. That's a 70% reduction from the $3,624%. Not a 70% reduction, a 30% reduction. So 70% of her full retirement benefit. Got to make sure I say that right or you will kill me in the comment section. Now, Randy, his full retirement benefit is $26.19. If he claims at 62, his 30% reduction or his 70% claiming of Social Security would be $1,833. And you can see how these go up with every year, 63, 64, 65. Now at 70, we've got a $4,000 number here for Jill. And we've got a $3,200 number here for Randy. And a lot of times when we're talking about Social Security, it's usually a game time decision. What I mean by game time decision is, where's the market? Where are your investments at? Where's Social Security at when we get to those appropriate ages? Most people will tell me, hey, Drew, I'm 53. I'm claiming Social Security at 62. It's my money. The government's had it for too long and I'm taking it right now. That's perfectly fine. I've got a lot of videos on this channel talking about claiming Social Security early because it made sense for those individual people. For Randy and Jill, because of how our assets are set up, because we have those freedom buckets, if we can push Social Security to 67, 68, 69, maybe even 70, if the market cooperates, if we're able to get the rates of return that we want on our stock market investments, that's going to give them a guaranteed stream of income that has a guaranteed COLA on it, backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. Now, I obviously understand that things can change with Social Security, but I highly doubt your congressperson is going to want to come on TV and tell you, hey, I know you're in your 60s and you're going to claim Social Security early, but we're going to have to take money away from you. And because of that, you're not going to get your full amount of Social Security. They will be voted out of office. What's actually probably going to happen is it's going to hurt me and my kids more than it's going to hurt you in your 50s and 60s. So for Jill and Randy, we still want to do exact planning for them, understanding that Social Security is probably going to be in its same form as it is currently. Now, we don't have any pensions, okay? We've already gone through assets. We've got about $4.5 million in retirement assets. We've got a home that's worth $700,000. So when we look at our total net worth, we have spendable assets of $4.5 million, and we have protected assets of $700,000. That's the home, for a total net worth of about $5.2 million. Now, Randy just actually bought an old dump truck and he's working on that. I'm not sure if that would be considered a total asset since it's like a 1960s dump truck, but really excited to see how it goes. And hopefully he can find me my 85 C10 because that would be my dream truck because that's what I grew up driving on the farm. Now, from an expense standpoint, we've got $9,964 in monthly expenses. So you can see where this all is laid out. Baseline expenses are $45.83. These are your survival expenses. So going to the grocery store, streaming bills, some of your insurances are in there, not health insurance, but some of your insurances are in there. Anything that you're going to be needing at 90, that's in the baseline. Now we have house repair, car repairs of $416. We've got utilities, water, cable phone, property taxes, home and car insurance, and we also have health insurance of $1,450 forever, okay? And we have IRMA built into here. Now, IRMA is the cost of Medicare that comes out of your Social Security check at age 65. Currently, it's at $185. It can go up based on your income, married, filing jointly, or single, whatever. Now, the health insurance number is $1,450. We're looking at this in perpetuity. Will their Medicare cost at 65 be $1,450 for the couple? Probably not. That's like, I know it's somewhere in the $700 range. That's $725 a month for each of them. That's probably going to be too high. But I would rather shoot here, and if we come in here, we high five and we chest bump.
So what we're trying to do is get an accurate reading of what our current monthly expenses are and what's the inflation rate that's going to be on those current monthly expenses. Because if we don't understand our inflation and we don't have a budget, I always say that's a curse word for most people, a B-U-D-G-E-T, budget. If we don't have that, then understanding how much can I spend in retirement makes no sense, right? If for Randy and Jill, if they needed $200,000 a year in retirement income, and that's a crazy number. But if I told them, hey, your portfolio can shoot up $180,000 a year and you're going to be just fine. But if they needed $200,000 because they did a budget, then me telling them they need $180,000 makes no sense. That's negative 20 of what they actually need. And that works just for you if you've got $500,000 saved or $100,000 saved or $1 million saved for retirement. It doesn't matter. You want to understand your budget, you want to understand inflation, and you want to understand how much income do I need to satisfy those two pieces plus T-A-X-E-S, taxes. Okay? Let's go taxes. So here we are. Here's taxes. Let's go to the year 2026. So what we've got our federal taxes and we have our state taxes. Remember, I told you they are in New York and they have state and local taxes. So from a tax standpoint, we've got about $140,000 in taxable withdrawals, okay, based on where we're at currently. So that's putting them in this 27.5% tax bracket. Now you might be saying, Drew, 27.5, that seems really high. What we've done in this standpoint is we did an increase for them of taxes of 25% just to see what would happen. Now, I understand the way the current tax code is, we're probably not going to see an increase. So let's take that down to 0. And they're in the 22% bracket. So what we're trying to look at in every situation is what ifs. What if taxes go up? What if inflation goes up? What if the market doesn't return what we expect it to return? What if I have a life event? What if I have to go into long-term care? What if my spouse dies? It's kind of like your blood work, right? You go to the doctor, you do your blood work, he looks at it and he says, hey, Drew, I have genetically high cholesterol. He says, hey, Drew, your cholesterol is a little high. You have the risk of a heart attack over the next 10 years. I might live till I'm 95 eating lard. But the doctor's looking at it and saying, hey, based on these situations, based on your projected blood work and your eating habits, this is kind of what you're looking at. And so we're doing the same thing with our retirement planning. Now, thank God my cholesterol is lower and I am eating better. Kale, lots and lots of kale. But for them, what we're trying to say is, what if? So we're in the 22% bracket from a tax standpoint. Here's our state taxes. So our federal tax, $14,379, state tax, $9,898. $24,276 in total taxes. So when I'm talking to you about $180,000 is what they can generate using the 4% rule on $4.5 million, you've got to take out $24,276 from that 180. Or you got to add $24,000 to the top of the 180, which is more than the 4% rule. So you see how this can get a little quirky as you go through it? Now, let's go back. So that's taxes. Let's go to retirement because they are retired. So essentially, we've got some deferred comp coming in here. Here's our distribution, $10,098 for 2025. Let's go to 2026, $10,427. Here's our assets. And essentially at 80 years old, we've got $5.4 million. Now we're doing a rate of return of 4% for their money, 2% in the bank, 4% in the market. So it's a very low rate of return. I'm rather come in low than come in high. I had someone send me a proposal from another advisor at one of those large brokerage houses that said, hey, we can get you 8 to 10% a year for the rest of your life. I almost fell over. I was like, are you serious? You're projecting out 8 to 10%. Now, I understand the market is averaged somewhere around 8 to 10% for the last 50 years. But like, you're gonna guarantee that? Seems a little silly. So let's go to a year and let's look at the exact income on this. So let's go look at 2026. So we have two scenarios here. We have pre-Social Security, and then we have Jill going on Social Security, and then Randy going on Social Security. So let's look at it before Social Security first. So from an income standpoint, we basically have our net monthly expenses right here. And then we have what we had to pull out of the portfolio to satisfy our expenses, okay? So how much did we need to pull out? $141,033 to satisfy our net monthly expenses of $123,305. Remember, taxes. So for them, this was the number that we need to generate from their investments. Not what's the max I can spend and blow it all. It was how much matches our budget, right? And we have fun and travel and doing cool stuff in their budget, but what matches where you're at? We're not trying to build a plan that can be attached to just anyone. That's Pillsbury dough. That's pop it out of your fridge, put it on the cookie sheet, and put it in the oven and eat your cookies. What you want going into retirement is a comprehensive, individualized retirement plan that's built on Jill and Randy. It's built on you. And if you want that, go to the description below. Let's get together. Let's build out your financial EKG. So again, we're at 141. Now, that's pre-Social Security. Let's go to Social Security. So now here's Jill going on Social Security at 67. So let's look at this. So she goes on Social Security. So how much retirement income do we need to generate now that Jill is on Social Security? Well, let's do some simple math. Jill's going to get $43,488 from Social Security. Okay? Here's our expenses, $151,698. That's with inflation, right? That's inflation growing our expenses. Our net monthly cash flow that we need to pull out of our portfolio is $143,508 because of taxes. Social Security's taxed, called provisional income. You can see that right here, okay? So we have these two numbers that are getting us to where we need to go. So $143,508 is what we need to pull out of our portfolio. $43,488 is what we got from Social Security. That is $186,000. So $186,000 is what Jill and Randy can expect in retirement income once Jill is taking Social Security. Okay, now let's clear this. Let's go to Randy going on Social Security. So here's Randy at 67. So let's go 2036. So now we've got them both on Social Security. Jill's is increased with COLAs. So our Social Security now is $80,052. Here's our net monthly expenses with inflation. Remember, it was $153 when Jill was 67. Now Randy's 67, and it's gone from $153 to $174. That's $20,000. Here's our net monthly cash flow, $135,498. It actually went down. So we were pulling out $140, $143, $145. Now that Randy has waited until 67 to pull his Social Security, we've maximized this column here. Now what we have to pull out of our portfolio has gone down, and that would work for you if you've got $250,000 saved for retirement, or $750,000 saved for retirement, or $2 million saved for retirement. We're trying to look at how can we maximize our Social Security to best benefit what we're pulling out of our portfolio, right? Because we don't want this to go to zero. And if it does go to zero, we want this number to be maximized because cash flow in retirement is king, little k. Jesus is king, big K. Cash flow is little k in retirement. So let's add these up. $80,052 plus $135,498, and that's $215,000. That's how much their portfolio will generate for them in retirement income, along with their Social Security, along with everything added together. We're at $215,000. So that's what you've got to look at. It can't just be how much can I get? It's how much can I generate based on the system that I'm in? Social Security, pensions, taxes. Now, let's do something fun. I want to go back to their assets. And I want to go to this brokerage account here that's $550,000. And what I want to do for them is this is something that we do for our clients, and when we're going through the EKG, we really try to dive down in on this. So for them, we've got $550,000 in a non-qualified Fidelity account. Non-qualified just meaning you're going to pay taxes on dividends, interest, capital gains, right? Well, the cost basis for this account is about $300,000, meaning they've put in $300,000 to this portfolio over time, and it's grown to $550,000. We're currently reinvesting dividends. But what we could do is we could use those dividends to pay expenses. And from a percentage standpoint, our annual yield at the current level, let's just say we can get 4.5%. Let's be conservative on this. And we're going to pay this out for life. So this portfolio is going to generate 4.5% on this $550,000 as we pay it out for expenses for life. We're going to have long-term capital gains taxation because this is a portfolio that we've held longer than a year. So a short-term capital gain means you bought Apple stock on May 1st and you sold it on July 1st of the same year. So anytime you sell a security, mutual fund, stock, bond, less than a year of holding it, and you have a gain, that's called a short-term capital gain, and the taxes fall under ordinary income. A long-term capital gain means you held your stock, bond, mutual fund longer than 12 months, and then you sold it for a gain and didn't repurchase the same stock, bond, mutual fund, or similar stock, bond, mutual fund within 30 days. Then you have a long-term capital gain. So for them, we're going to look at long-term capital gains, and we're going to look at qualified dividends, and we're going to save and close. So now we go back to retirement and we go to 2026. Now look at what we've got. We've got this Fidelity dividend inflow. So now here's our monthly cash flow, the Fidelity dividend, $19,922. Here's our net monthly cash flow, $114,548. Now why is that? Because now we've got this $20,000 flowing in, and this is $123 that we need for expenses. So we only have to pull out this from our portfolio, right, from taxes, because we're getting this in dividends. That's the beauty of doing this. That's the beauty of doing this kind of planning. You see that? Let's go to when they're both on Social Security. We still have our dividends coming in, okay? And so now, 135 and 80. What's that number? Let's do 135 plus 80. That's $215,000 because we have those dividends. So this is a wonderful way to look at your portfolio and to determine how much can I spend in retirement based on the amount of money that I have saved. Well, I hope this video's helped. Thank you for watching. God bless. Goodbye.